Chapter 289. Pang Xiao said, "It's almost done." Ji Ziyu jumped off his horse and threw the reins to his follower. He walked side by side with Pang Xiao. "Qin, did you kill him?" "No." The two entered the city and walked on the bustling streets of the capital. They did not speak for a while. They were both tall and handsome. One of them was wearing a black mink fur cloak and had an imposing aura. The other was wearing a white fox fur cloak and looked as cold as ice. They walked side by side and attracted the attention of many people in the capital. Many people recognized that the one in black was the commander of the Tiger Army, Prince Zhongshuan, Pang Xiao. The one in white was the commander of the Dragon Stallion Army, Marquis Dingbei, Ji Ziyu. However, because they were outside and no one knew if these two people with military power had important matters to discuss, no one came forward to disturb them. As Pang Xiao walked, he was worried about Qin Yining's health. The capital was located in the north. It was a place that Qin Yining had never been to before. She was already so cold in the south. How could she stand it here? Moreover, her body was weak and she did not have enough qi and blood. When they parted, she was still coughing. When Pang Xiao thought about this, he could not hide the worry in his expression. Ji Ziyu saw his expression. After a long time, so long that Pang Xiao had forgotten what he had talked about with Ji Ziyu suddenly said, "It's nothing." Pang Xiao was taken aback by Chu Yang's sudden question. Ji Ziyu had already taken the reins from his follower and jumped onto his horse. "Your Majesty ordered me to set off. I'll take my leave now." Pang Xiao said in surprise, "Why are you in such a hurry?" "Yes. Let's meet again next time." The corners of Ji Ziyu's lips curled up in a rare smile. Then, he cupped his hands towards Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao sighed softly and said, "All right, let's meet again next time." He also cupped his hands at Ji Ziyu. Ji Ziyu put away his smile and coldly glanced at Pang Xiao and the people around him before he turned around and left. Huzi shuddered. Marquis Dingbei's temperament hasn't changed after all these years. The way he looks at others is as if he has a grudge against you. Pang Xiao only shook his head with a smile and sighed, "Forget it. Since I'm back, let's enter the palace and meet the emperor first." He did not want to be caught by those imperial censors who had nothing better to do and accuse him of disrespecting your majesty. Back in the capital, Pang Xiao naturally had to tighten all his nerves to deal with the things around him. The politics of officialdom ran deep. Back then, in order to conquer the world for the Zhou dynasty, he was the one who stood up for all the bad things. In addition, he avenged his father by dismembering many people. Not to mention his fierce reputation, even the surrendered officials of the Beiji kingdom looked at him as if he had killed their father. It was impossible to guard against open knives and hidden arrows. He had to be extremely vigilant to deal with all these. Moreover, the person on the emperor's seat had always held a grudge against him. Things really happened as Pang Xiao expected. In the majestic imperial palace, a middle-aged man with a medium build and a kind face was dressed in a bright yellow emperor's robe. He helped Pang Xiao up with both hands and his voice was full of joy. "Brother, please get up. You've been away for so long and we haven't spoken for a long time. I've missed you so much." Pang Xiao took a few steps back and stood at the bottom of the stairs. He said respectfully, "So have I. How has your majesty been these days?" "Good, all is well. I just miss you very much. You did a great job on Dian. However, things like accepting the surrender and handing over are too complicated. I don't want you to be tired anymore, so I simply asked you to come back. You won't blame me, right? Your Majesty is too polite." Pang Xiao said with a smile, "I'm very happy. You know, I'm the most impatient to do these troublesome and brain-consuming things. If I have the time, I'd rather eat a few cups of good wine. Ha! You're right. Li Qitian laughed loudly and then said, You've worked hard this time. You've been away for long enough. The elders at home miss you very much. You should be by their side more to fulfill your filial piety. In addition, you've overworked yourself. I plan to temporarily let Sua Jinwei, the Minister of War, act as the Commander-in-Chief of the Tiger Army. You can rest in the capital at ease. What do you think? He was going to take back his military power. Pang Shao lowered his eyes and bowed respectfully. Your Majesty's order is exactly what I want. I thank your Majesty for your kindness. Li Qitian didn't seem to expect that Pang Shao would agree so easily. He was stunned for a moment and then smiled calmly. Good, good. I'll give you 100 mu of fertile land, 100 taels of gold, and 10 beauties as concubines. You must rest well during this time. My show still depends on you. As long as your Majesty orders, I'm willing to sacrifice my life for it. Pang Shao thanked him respectfully again. When he entered the palace, Pang Shao was still the commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army. When he left the palace, he had been stripped of his military power and handed over the commander's seal. He became an idle Wang Yi with only the title of Wang and no official position. In addition to his personal guards, there were also eunuchs who gave him rewards. At the end of the line, there were 10 beautiful women with different characteristics. Guzi frowned and whispered in Pang Zhao's ear, Wang Yi, if fourth miss knew that you had 10 concubines before she married you, what would she do? He really touched a sore spot. Pang Shao was expressionless, but he couldn't get more impatient in his heart. When he returned to Prince Zhongshuan's mansion, he had people take the 10 beauties to settle down. Then he went to pay his respects to his mother, grandfather, and grandmother. While Pang Shao was reunited with his family, he didn't know that Ji Ziyu, who was supposed to take his personal guards to the Taiten in the north, left the capital through the north gate. He took a big detour and went straight to the south where Dian was located. Miss, hold on to this hand warmer. Don't catch a cold again. In the spacious carriage, Ji Yun stuffed a brass hand warmer into Qin Yining's arms. Qin Yining quickly took it and put his cold hands on it. Only then did he feel much better. He smiled and said, How can I catch a cold so easily? Don't worry, I'm feeling much better now. I just didn't expect the winter in Dezhou to be so cold. It's really hard to travel in the middle of winter. 10 days ago, the county king of Dezhou led his family and the first group of officials and family members who surrendered to Dezhou on a journey to the capital of Dezhou in the north. The Yan dynasty was located in the south. Even if it snowed in the winter, it was difficult to stand on the ground. However, the closer they got to the capital, the colder the weather became. When they passed through Liang City on the border between the two countries and entered Dezhou's territory, everything was covered in snow. Pine and cypress trees stood tall in the mountains. People from the south could not adapt to such cold weather. Fortunately, Qin Yining had lived on the border for many years. He adapted better than the rest of the family. At that moment, there was a sudden commotion in front of the carriage. The carriage slowly came to a stop. Qin Yining asked curiously, What's going on? I'll go take a look. Ji Yun jumped down from the carriage. For this journey, the Yuqi Yen, concubines, and palace servants were at the back of the procession. In front of them was the procession of the Ongwa Duxley family. Further ahead was the procession of the imperial tutors Gu family. The fourth family in front was the family Qin. In front of the family Qin, there were more than 10 other families' carriages leading the way. Ji Yun craned her neck to look ahead. Suddenly, her expression changed drastically. Amidst the white snow, a large group of masked men dressed in animal skins charged into the carriages, brandishing their swords, spears, and clubs. They chopped down anyone they saw, especially the women in the carriages and palanquins. They dragged them out and chopped them to the ground one by one. Chapter 290. Qin Yining couldn't react in time. She didn't expect that the group that surrendered to the Dian dynasty would encounter bandits. Their journey had been very smooth. Because they were surrendered subjects, their group was only escorted by 100 people from the Tiger Army. Most of the rest of the Tiger Army had already returned to the capital 10 days ago. As a surrendered subject, the Yuchi Yen were not allowed to bring any soldiers with them. They only had a few loyal guards with them. Family Qin was in a better situation. The silver-masked spies of the retired emperor had lost their previous master. Because the new emperor brought in new ministers, they weren't placed in an important position by the new emperor. They were now employed by Qin Huayuan. However, they were assigned to work by Qin Huayuan. There were only 4 silver-masked spies accompanying them. Including Chao Yuqing, there were only 5 of them. How could they protect the entire group? Qin Yining put on her soft-soled boots. Before she could get off the carriage, bandits in front of the group brandished large swords and galloped over on horseback. There were old, weak, women, and children in the group. For a moment, screams and screams could be heard. Some people fled in all directions, while others ran wildly with the carriages. The entire group was scattered. The 3 carriages in front of family Qin were also rushed in different directions by the bandits. Qin Yining looked through the window and saw Chao Yuqing jump into the Sun Clan's and Qin Huayuan's carriages. With a shake of the reins, she drove the carriage in the northwest direction. Ji Yun, who was standing in front of the carriage, had already lowered her body and narrowly avoided an arrow. "Miss, be careful." The other party was using bows and arrows. It was an indiscriminate massacre. They didn't want to rob them at all, nor did they want to leave anyone alive. In the carriage, Qin Yining hurriedly erected the square table in front of her. Qiu Lu and Bing Tang screamed and hid behind the table with Qin Yining. "Ji Yun. Be careful." Qin Yining shrank her body as much as she could. She heard the continuous thud, thud, thud sounds of arrows hitting the roof and walls of the carriage. Then her hands shook and several arrows hit the upright square table. Qin Yining's eyes were about to split open. She anxiously shouted, "Ji Yun, hide. Don't worry about me." Outside the carriage, Ji Yun continuously rolled in the snow and finally hid behind a thick tree. But she was suppressed by the other party's arrows, she couldn't raise her head. Qin Yining's carriage driver was shot by a stray arrow. He was hit by a stray arrow. He Yining the horse's whip and the reins in his hands, is Yining's horse's carriage's carriage, the carriage's horse's carriage, and the carriage's only horse's carriage zestes escape was horse's escape. The horse that was pulling the reins was also startled. It ran wildly and overturned the carriage. In the carriage, Qin Yining, Qiu Lu, and Bing Tang only felt the sky and earth spinning, and then they fell together heavily. At this time, the bandits' arrows were probably used up. They shouted and waved their clubs and swords again. Qin Yining hurriedly pushed Qiu Lu and Bing Tang, "Get out of here, quickly run." "Miss, I'm scared." Qiu Lu sobbed. "Even if you're scared, you still have to run. Don't tell me you want to stay here and wait for death." Qin Yining was the first to climb out of the overturned carriage. She met a bandit's eyes. She screamed, turned around, and ran. The burly man immediately chased after her with his sword. Bing Tang and Qiu Lu hid in the carriage, trembling. They saw that Qin Yining had lured a bandit away. They were so scared that they covered their mouths and cried silently. However, they didn't dare to delay and ran out of the carriage. Qin Yining was wearing a thick cotton-padded dress, a cotton-padded cloak with a gray mouse collar, and a pair of deerskin boots. It was quite light for her to run on her natural feet. She wasn't a delicate and weak young lady from a wealthy family. In the past, she was used to hunting and gathering herbs for a living. Although her body was damaged after she was injured, she was now running for her life in a time of crisis. Thus, she erupted with unprecedented potential. She lifted her skirt and stepped on the snow that reached her ankles, leaving the big man behind. In addition, the man in the middle chased after two targets that were closer to him and rushed forward to attack. This gave Qin Yining the opportunity to escape. She looked at the surrounding terrain and directly ran in the direction of the messy footprints in the snow. She ran up the mountain. The wilderness was in chaos. At this time, the 100 Tiger Army soldiers who were ordered to escort them gradually took control of the situation with the cooperation of Xiao Yong and Pang Xiao. Under the urging of Lian Xingjie, they rushed to the front of the troops, trying to capture the bandit leader alive. In front of the road, a fiery red warhorse stood upright. A handsome man wearing a snow-white fox fur coat was sitting on the horse. He looked expressionlessly at the silver-white Fergana horse that his attendant had brought over. His sword-like eyebrows gradually knitted together. It was Bai Yun, Pang Zhixi's favorite horse. How could it appear in the troops of the Dian officials who surrendered? Master Ho. Let's retreat. Yes, Master Ho. The Tiger Army is not to be trifled with. Although we won't be at a disadvantage if we face them head-on, it will be easy to expose our identities. Ji Ziyu's eyes darkened. He coldly looked at the Tiger Army in front of him, who was like a ferocious tiger descending the mountain. In the end, he did not want to face them head-on. One team, stay behind. Avoid the Tiger Army and search the mountains. Try to find the family Qin people and kill them all. The rest, follow me and retreat. Ji Ziyu raised his hand and signaled. He immediately turned the horse around, took the reins of White Cloud from his attendant, and led it away. The attendants and deputy generals looked at each other. Did the Master Ho come here specifically for the family Qin? However, they had disguised themselves as bandits and randomly charged in. Who knew how many family Qin people they had killed? Corpses were strewn all over the wilderness. Fresh blood bloomed on the snowy ground. The remaining team of Dragon Stallion Army deliberately avoided the Tiger Army and followed the footprints up the mountain. When the Lian Xingjie saw that the bandits had retreated, he looked at the corpses all over the ground. There were also those who had been cut up and were crying on the ground. He was so anxious that he stomped his feet. Hurry, hurry up. How many are still alive? Oh my God, how am I going to explain this to your Majesty? Hurry up and see if the County King of Yen is still alive. And the family Qin. Just as the Tiger Army was cleaning up the mess, someone had already followed the footprints up the mountain. Coincidentally, they were chasing in the direction of Qin Yining. Qin Yining did not dare to delay. She tied her skirt to her belt, hugged her cloak with both hands, and ran madly into the depths of the forest. If it was not winter and there was no snow on the ground to expose her footprints, Qin Yining was actually very confident that she could shake off her pursuers in the forest. However, the problem was that the mountain was now covered in snow. Not only would she leave footprints when she stepped on the snow, but there would also be a creaking sound. Occasionally, she would accidentally step on a branch under the snow, which would make a loud crisp sound. Qin Yining vaguely heard the voices of two men behind her. In front. There are footsteps. Qin Yining was so scared that she almost stopped breathing. She did not care about her tiredness and rushed toward the most secluded and difficult to walk in the depths of the mountain. She was now very grateful for the experience she had when she was young. It allowed her to not be so exhausted when she was being hunted, and she did not panic when she entered the mountain. Based on her experience in the forest, she walked all the way into the dense forest. She saw that the snow on the ground in front of her was gradually thinning until there were only some ice shards left. In front of her, there was a large area that was slightly moist and emitted a faint white steam. However, there was definitely no snow on the ground. Chapter 291. Heaven never bars one's way out. With this piece of land warmed by the underground spring, she didn't have to worry about not being able to cover her tracks. Qin Yining ran along the snowy road for a while, deliberately leaving a trail of footprints in another direction. Then, she stepped on a bush and jumped onto the black soil covered with pine needles, carefully taking a few steps forward. There was a steady stream of white steam rising from the ground, warming up the soles of her feet. Qin Yining was afraid of leaving footprints, and there would be more snow if she continued forward, so she simply tucked her cloak into her belt and climbed up a thick and tall pine tree. She chose a spot with dense branches and leaves and sat down on one of the sturdy branches. As she moved, the tall canopy swayed slightly. Snow rustled down, but it melted as soon as it touched the ground. Only then did Qin Yining dare to quietly take a few deep breaths. At this moment, the sound of footsteps could be heard. Qin Yining hurriedly held her breath, her whole body stiffening like a piece of wood. She didn't dare to move at all, pretending that she was part of the big pine tree. Two masked bandits walked not far away, one holding a steel knife and the other holding a wooden stick as thick as a wine cup. They both lowered their heads to look at the footprints on the ground, then immediately followed the footprints that Qin Yining had deliberately left behind. Not long after, perhaps because the footprints had been cut off, the two returned. They searched for a while on the ground covered by the warm spring, but didn't find any other footprints. Moreover, the two of them had wandered around aimlessly to investigate, and their own footprints had already destroyed the scene. For a while, there were no more clues. The two of them looked at each other and cursed. A little girl can actually run so fast. The person who spoke had a northern accent, obviously from Dezhou. The other person said, "The Marquis ordered us to find the family Qin and kill them all. I don't know if the one we're chasing is the one with the surname Qin. No matter if it is or not, since we've caught up with her, we can't let her get away so easily. I don't believe that she can really disappear. Let's keep searching. Maybe she's hiding in some tree hole." The two of them then began to search for tree holes, natural caves, and underground caves nearby. In the end, they really did find traces of a collapse in the snow not far away. Hidden under the snow was a large puddle. That puddle should be the underground warm spring. The water had a faint stench, and they did not know how deep it was. They could only see the dense fog that turned the surrounding snow into smooth ice. The two of them didn't dare to move forward, fearing that the snow under their feet would loosen and they would accidentally fall into a puddle of unknown depth. This mountain was really full of dangers. This place was already deep in the mountains and forests. Even hunters wouldn't come here to hunt. Thus, the two of them circled around this dangerous area and began to search nearby. Qin Yining was not in a hurry to leave. He continued to hide in the tree and waited for 2 hours. After confirming that the two of them had no intention of returning, he carefully slid down the tree. She didn't dare to stay here for long, so she deliberately ran into the depths of the uncultivated forest. She even broke off a branch with dead leaves hanging on it. Along the way, she paid attention to cleaning up the traces of her footsteps. In this way, she carefully ran into the mountains until the sky turned dark. Qin Yining really couldn't run anymore. She forced herself to support herself against a tree and panted heavily. Looking around, the scenery was the same. The only thing she could tell was whether she was going up or going down. The night wind in the north was bone-chilling. Once she stopped, her body would start to feel cold. Qin Yining's sweat-soaked back was blown by the wind. It was so cold that she couldn't stop shivering. She looked around and dragged her tired body to a slope against the wind by the roots of a large tree. This place was in a semi-concave state. Above her head, there was a shelter made of tree roots. Beside her, there were two large rocks that could provide some shelter from the cold wind. Moreover, there was no snow on the ground. Qin Yining went to look for firewood, hay, and pine needles. With trembling hands, she took out a lighter from her bosom. First, she lit the hay and pine needles. Then, she chose a dry tree branch and made a small bonfire for herself behind the large rock. Qin Yining's body had just recovered from a serious illness and was extremely tired. She couldn't help but cough. However, she knew that she could only rest for a short while. If she didn't take any precautions and just stood there by a bonfire that could burn out at any time, she would definitely freeze to death. Qin Yining hugged her knees and wrapped herself tightly in her cloak. After warming herself for a while, she felt that her limbs were more flexible. Then, she went to look for firewood, pine needles, and dried grass. Afterwards, she went to look for some shrubs and spent a tremendous amount of effort to remove many branches from the shrubs. Qin Yining couldn't help but smile bitterly. Compared to when she was 8 years old, when she went up the mountain, at least she had some handy tools in her hands. She didn't have to rely on her bare hands to do anything. Fortunately, she was quite experienced in dealing with these things. Qin Yining busied herself for a full 2 hours. She used the branches of the shrubs to weave a curved shelter for herself. It was big enough for her to sit in while hugging her knees. Then, she started a bonfire. She dragged the shelter to the ground behind the large rock that was slightly warm from the bonfire. Then, she took off her towel and an overcoat. She used these two things to wrap the snow and dry it over the fire. The snow melted and wet the overcoat and towel. Qin Yining hurriedly covered the simple shelter that she had made. It just happened to cover the shelter. Qin Yining didn't dare to delay. She immediately went to fetch snow. While the overcoat and towel were still wet, she sprinkled a layer of snow on top of them. When the snow came into contact with the wet cloth, it immediately stuck tightly and was frozen into ice by the low temperature. Qin Yining used an hour to firmly cover the shelter made of tree branches with snow. After sprinkling a layer of snow, she took out some very hot branches from the bonfire and placed them on top of the shelter. When the snow came into contact with the hot branches, it melted into water, and the water turned into ice. Slowly, it formed a very sturdy shui shelter. Qin Yining rubbed her hands that were red from the cold and were about to lose feeling. She covered her mouth and coughed a few times. She thought about how it was already late and that it was impossible for her to hunt in the mountains with her bare hands. She might as well starve for a night. She wouldn't starve to death, so she didn't think about anything else. She also gathered a lot of dry firewood and pine needles nearby. She added pine needles to the bonfire outside the cave and started a bonfire inside the shelter. Finally, Qin Yining took off her cotton-padded jacket and hung it vertically at the entrance of the cave. It was just the right size. She wrapped herself tightly with the cloak and wrapped her cotton skirt around her feet. Qin Yining faced the bonfire and hugged her knees as she leaned against a tree branch and dozed off peacefully. Although there was still wind coming in through the cracks and smoke coming from the fire inside the shelter, the smoke just happened to come out through the cracks. Even if it was a little choking, it was still better than sleeping in the open and freezing to death. Qin Yining wrapped herself in the cloak and slept lightly for a night. As her hands and feet gradually warmed up, she felt that even if she were to starve, it wouldn't be so unbearable. At night in the mountains, danger lurked everywhere. She could faintly hear the howls of wolves in the distance. Qin Yining didn't dare to relax, but she also didn't treat herself unfairly. She had a pretty good night. When she woke up early the next morning, other than her body feeling a little sore from sleeping while sitting, everything else was fine. Chapter 292. Qin Yining analyzed a few things from the conversation of the people who chased after them yesterday. First, from their accent, he could tell that they were from Dezhou in the north. Secondly, they were ordered by a marquis to kill Qin Haodong. Third, these people stayed behind to search the mountain. If they didn't kill Qin Yining, they wouldn't be able to report back. Fourth, these people's martial arts skills were comparable to the Tiger armies. Although they couldn't win, they weren't far behind. Then there was a problem. Which army did these men, who were well organized and were as skilled as the Tiger army, belong to? Who was this marquis who gave the order to kill the family Qin people? Which other marquis in the great Zhou dynasty had the ability to lead 200 to 300 skilled soldiers to intercept and kill them? Qin Yining didn't suspect that these people were sent by the Emperor of Zhou. The Emperor of Zhou wanted the surrendered officials of the Yan dynasty to help him balance out the two powers in the imperial court. If he didn't want the surrendered officials, he could have not persuaded them to surrender in the beginning. There was no need to send people to kill them halfway. Therefore, this assassination must have been done by a marquis with a high position and military power who deceived the Emperor of Zhou. Qin Yining already had an answer in his mind. Could it really be Marquis Dingbei, who was sworn brothers with Pang Shao and the Emperor of Zhou? But shouldn't Marquis Dingbei be stationed at the border between Dezhou and Taidan with the Dragon Stallion army? Why would he let someone appear here at this time? If the assassins were only targeting the family Qin people, why would those fake bandits kill so many innocent people in front of the group? If it wasn't for the family Qin people, she would have overheard the conversation between the two assassins. Thousands of thoughts couldn't be sorted out in a short period of time. However, Qin Yining was sure of one thing, and that was that she had to hide well for the next few days. She couldn't leave the mountain immediately. Those assassins were ordered to come. If they didn't bring back a head, they wouldn't be able to report back. They would definitely appear again. She was alone and couldn't beat them, so she could only hide. Fortunately, she had experience in surviving in the mountains. Although it was winter and not a single blade of grass grew, Qin Yining was still confident that he could persevere. However, thinking about how Lian Xingjie must be pounding his chest and stamping his feet now, Qin Yining felt a burst of joy in his heart. The Lian Xingjie was ordered to accept the document of surrender. Since he had brought the county prince of Yan and the Dian officials back to the capital, he naturally had to take precautions. Now that such a tragedy had occurred on the road, if Emperor Zhou knew about it, he would be furious. Only with these two things could one live a comfortable life. However, although this kind of life wasn't comfortable, Qin Yining was willing to endure it. Smelling the rich meat aroma of the roasted frog, Qin Yining optimistically thought, today's luck isn't bad. Who knows, I might be able to catch a wild rabbit tomorrow. At that time, I won't have to worry about starving to death. Just as she was letting her imagination run wild, she suddenly heard the crunching sound of someone stepping on the snow. Qin Yining was so scared that she almost threw the frog away. She hurriedly picked up a short sword and vigilantly looked in the direction of the sound. At this moment, a gust of wind blew past, causing the bushes to shake. A furry creature about 3 feet tall suddenly ran off into the distance. What kind of animal was that? Qin Yining focused and stared in that direction for a while. When she didn't find any wild animals, she let out a sigh of relief. Qin Yining thought, fortunately, I didn't encounter any wild wolves. Otherwise, it would have been even more dangerous. After eating a tasteless frog that didn't have much meat, Qin Yining felt her body become much warmer. She began to lay some dry straw in her nest. At this moment, she seemed to hear a slight rustling sound. From the corner of her eye, she saw a figure scurrying past. Qin Yining became serious this time. What kind of small animal was that? Why was his speed so fast? He was actually as agile as a leopard. Qin Yining remained calm and collected all the weapons she had picked up. Then, she hurriedly picked up a torch that was placed over the fire. If it was a small animal, it should be afraid of fire. After standing there for a long time, the small animal didn't appear again. Qin Yining let out a sigh of relief. She guessed that the small animal had run off into the distance. She continued to use the straw to lay down her nest. At this moment, Qin Yining suddenly felt something behind her. She quickly turned around and saw a figure approaching her. It was a child about 7 or 8 years old. He was wearing a thick animal hide. His face was dirty and his hair was messy. At this moment, he was placing a half-burned wild rabbit next to her fire. Perhaps he didn't expect her to suddenly turn around, but the child was startled. His eyes immediately widened. Qin Yining said in astonishment, "Hey, you," unexpectedly. Before she could finish speaking, the child turned around and ran off. He was as fast as a gust of wind. Qin Yining suddenly realized that the small animal she saw earlier was this child. Chapter 293. Porridge. 1. Qin Yining chased a few steps forward, but she was not as fast as the child. She could only watch the back of the child wearing animal skin disappear into the bushes. Even hunters would not come to this desolate mountain to hunt. How could a 7 or 8-year-old child appear here? Could there be a village nearby? Qin Yining was puzzled, but in the blink of an eye, his attention was attracted by the wild rabbit on the ground. It was a slightly fat gray rabbit. The fur on its body had been roughly processed and roasted. However, it was obvious that the person who roasted the rabbit wasn't skilled enough. It was roasted until it was dripping with blood and its internal organs weren't cleaned. Qin Yining guessed that it was the child's handiwork. She wondered when the child had discovered her. However, Qin Yining was certain that the child did not harbor any hostility toward her. It was a habit she had developed over the years, so she did not detect any hostility from the child. Besides, if the child did harbor any hostility, the child would not have given her such precious food. Qin Yining carried the rabbit and walked a little further away with a dagger. He carefully dealt with the rabbit's internal organs, cut off the burnt fur, and buried it together with the internal organs in the snow to prevent the smell of blood from attracting other wild beasts. He then used the snow to carefully wash the rabbit meat and his own hands. After burying the dirty snow again, he returned with the properly treated rabbit. Qin Yining went to pick up some more firewood because the fire was no longer burning brightly. Now that she had a machete and a dagger, it was much more convenient for her to chop firewood. She also used a knife to cut off the wet parts of the firewood. This way, the smoke would be much less. Qin Yining skewered the rabbit with a tree branch and carefully roasted it over the fire. Although there was no salt, the aroma of the roasted meat still caused her stomach to rumble. After starving for 2 days, she had only eaten a roasted frog with little meat. In fact, she was already very hungry. Just then, Qin Yining heard the rustling of small animals moving in the snow. She looked up at the source of the sound and saw a small figure squatting behind the shrubs. Perhaps it was because they had just met face to face, but the child didn't run away the moment he saw her. Instead, he carefully squatted and inched forward, stretching his neck and wrinkling his dirty face. He kept twitching his little nose to sniff the aroma of the roasted rabbit. Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh. "Oh, it's you. Did you catch this rabbit?" Qin Yining waved at the child as he roasted the rabbit. The child seemed to be startled by her sudden voice. She blinked her big bright eyes and stared blankly at her. Qin Yining was a little puzzled. This child looked about 7 or 8 years old. He should be able to understand her, right? But living in such a deep mountain, perhaps it was a tribe that did not communicate with the outside world. What if he didn't understand her? Qin Yining used a dagger to cut off a piece of roasted meat and handed it to the child. "This is for you." She was afraid that she didn't understand, so she even gestured to him. This time, the child finally understood. Like an agile little monkey, he ran over and squatted down beside Qin Yining. He carefully used his little dirty hand to grab the piece of meat on the tip of the knife. Qin Yining was startled by him. She was afraid that she would cut his hand, so she hurriedly retracted her hand. "Be careful not to cut yourself." She took off the piece of meat and handed it to him. The child was originally very disappointed when she didn't give him the meat. Now that he saw her use her white jade-like hands to feed him the roasted meat, he was as happy as a little puppy. He swallowed the meat in one bite and narrowed his big eyes. Qin Yining was amused by his funny behavior. She couldn't help but ask, "Do you live here?" The child stared at the roasted rabbit and nodded. Qin Yining was delighted when she saw this. This child could understand her. "What's your name? How old are you?" The child continued to stare at the roasted rabbit. Qin Yining used a knife to slice off the roasted meat on the surface and fed it to the child. The child ate very happily, as if he hadn't eaten for a long time. His mouth was covered in oil, and his eyes curved into crescents as he smiled. Qin Yining felt sorry for him when she saw him like this. She asked again, "Where's your family?" They're dead." This time, the child actually opened his mouth to speak. However, as soon as he spoke, Qin Yining realized that there was a problem. The child's voice was a little hoarse from not speaking for a long time. His pronunciation was also very stiff, as if speaking was an extremely difficult task for him. "Are you saying that your family is all dead?" Qin Yining fed him another piece of meat. The child nodded as he chewed. He pointed in a certain direction and then pointed at the sword next to Qin Yining's hand. Qin Yining was stunned. She thought of the 4 corpses. 3 of them were wearing Zhou dynasty military uniforms, and 1 of them was wearing casual clothes. It was obvious that they were all male corpses. Moreover, they had perished together while fighting 1 against 3. Judging from the degree of decay of the clothes, the 4 corpses had been dead for at least 3 or 4 years. Qin Yining looked at the child with pity. "Is there anyone else in your family?" The child shook his head. "Then, where do you live? How old are you this year? What's your name?" The child pointed in another direction and said awkwardly, "I live in a house. I'm 9 years old. I'm called Xiaolian." "You're called Xiaolian. Is it the Lian from Lianhua?" Qin Yining looked at the child carefully. Because the child was young and dirty, it was impossible to tell whether he was a boy or a girl just by looking at his appearance. Xiaolian nodded. "Lianhua. In the vat. There's Lianhua. My name." Qin Yining smiled and nodded. It seemed that this was a little girl. Qin Yining's hands didn't stop moving. He gave her another piece of meat. Even though the meat wasn't salted, she still enjoyed it very much. She even tried her best to express, "It's delicious. It's better than the meat I roasted." Qin Yining's heart ached when he heard this. "Do you usually roast meat by yourself?" Xiaolian nodded and pointed in the direction where Qin Yining had found the corpses. She continued, "Uncle is." Qin Yining somewhat understood. The man who had been killed by the 3 people from the Zhou dynasty was this child's only family member. Without her family, she could only eat the half-roasted prey that she had roasted herself to satisfy her hunger. Qin Yining thought of the half-roasted rabbit that Xiaolian had secretly given her earlier. She knew that this child must have been eating this kind of thing all these years. She couldn't help but stroke her head lovingly. A 9-year-old child had already lived alone in this kind of deep mountain forest for 3 or 4 years. It would have been fine if she hadn't encountered them. But since they had encountered them, she couldn't ignore them anymore. With this in mind, Qin Yining made up her mind. Xiaoyan, can you take me to your house? Xiaoyan nodded happily. She reached out her dirty little hand and grabbed Qin Yining's hand. Let's go, let's go. Qin Yining immediately smiled. She casually ate a bit of the remaining rabbit meat and broke off a rabbit leg for Xiaoyan to play with. Then, she extinguished the bonfire and buried it in the snow. She took the weapons that she had collected and followed Xiaoyan into the depths of the mountain. Then, her big eyes widened because she saw the match in Qin Yining's hand. Fire. Qin Yining nodded. She smiled as she closed the match and handed it to Xiaoyan. This is for you. For me. Xiaoyan happily took it and removed the lid. Qin Yining taught her how to light it. Xiaoyan looked as if she had received a treasure. She carefully put the match into her clothes. When she looked at Qin Yining again, her eyes were shining with joy. Qin Yining could tell that Xiaoyan really liked her. Such a pure and kind-hearted child was using her clearest heart to try her best to get in touch with this world that was not full of kindness. Perhaps she had been alone in the mountains for too long and couldn't help but give her food as a sign of goodwill when she saw her own kind. Qin Yining took Xiaoyan's hand and sat down by the bonfire. She couldn't help but feel a little fortunate that she had met Xiaoyan today. If Xiaoyan had been a person with evil intentions, she would have been in danger since she was so pure. After all, the evilness of human hearts was even greater than that of wild beasts. At this moment, Xiaoyan stood up and took out a dirty quilt from a pile of things in the corner. She carried the quilt over as if she was presenting a treasure and piled it in front of Qin Yining. Older sister, Nuanyuan. Looking at the dirty quilt and the child's bright eyes, Qin Yining's heart ached so much that she almost cried. She smiled and nodded. She unfolded the quilt and pulled Xiaoyan to sit beside her. She then covered the two of them with the quilt. Xiaoyan smiled happily and stretched out her dirty little hands to warm them over the bonfire. That night, Qin Yining had a much more comfortable time than yesterday. With this wooden house, a bonfire, a dirty quilt, and a child squeezed next to her while drooling, she slept very peacefully. She no longer had to fear that wild beasts would suddenly come and eat her. At dawn the next day, Qin Yining woke up with a cough. She felt that her cold had worsened, but it was still within a tolerable range. She sat up and discovered that although there were no windows in the house and only a door, it wasn't completely dark inside. She raised her head to look at the light source and discovered that there was a bowl-sized skylight on the roof. She looked around and didn't see Xiaoyan. She didn't know where the child had gone. However, this house was really dirty and messy. The dust on the floor was probably at least 3 inches thick. Qin Yining stood up and looked around. Although there wasn't any furniture in the wooden house, there was a Kong bed on the floor. However, the Kong bed wasn't finished. Presumably, the uncle that Xiaoyan mentioned had passed away before he finished the work. In addition to the unfinished Kong bed, Qin Yining also found a dirty bundle piled up in the corner. The bundle had been opened, and several pieces of men's clothing were scattered around. Qin Yining squatted down to examine them. She discovered that among the clothes, there was a 4th-rank military uniform from Beiji country. Beiji country's military uniform was very unique. It had a bright red round collar and narrow sleeves, a leather soft armor, and a palm-wide cowhide belt. Qin Yining's expression became serious. It seemed that the uncle that Xiaoyan mentioned was a 4th-rank military officer from Beiji country. Xiaoyan's background was definitely not simple. Qin Yining felt some admiration for this military officer who brought Xiaoyan to hide in the mountains. She didn't know how many years ago they came here, but judging from the rotten state of the corpse's clothes, he had been dead for at least 3 to 4 years. Xiaolian was 9 years old now. In other words, when the uncle brought Xiaolian to hide in the mountains, Xiaolian was only 5 to 6 years old. What kind of power could make a military officer bring a 5 to 6-year-old girl to hide in the mountains, build a house, raise this child, and protect her from being hunted down? Qin Yining put away the clothes and wrapped them back into the bundle. She then tidied up the mess in the house, took out a rag, wrapped it in the snow outside, and melted it over the fire. Then, she began to clean the house. After repeating this several times and throwing away several pieces of rag, Qin Yining finally wiped the original color of the wooden floor. However, after she cleaned up the dust, she found an inconspicuous gap on the floor near the corner of the wall. She walked over in confusion and inserted a dagger into the gap to pry it open. Unexpectedly, she was able to pry open the square floorboard and find a square wooden box underneath. Qin Yining suspiciously took out the wooden box. The wooden box was extremely heavy, and she couldn't help but guess what was inside. She opened the box and saw a letter written on it. The words, "To be personally opened by Jin Xian," were written on the letter. Qin Yining picked up the letter. When she saw the item underneath, she couldn't help but be surprised. It was a large seal made of jade. The most unusual thing about the seal was that there was a coiling dragon carved on it. Qin Yining picked up the seal that was the size of a man's fist. When she saw the words, "Treasure of Beiji," carved on it, she was extremely shocked. This was clearly an imperial seal. It was the imperial seal of Beiji country, which had been destroyed by Du Zhou 4 years ago. Chapter 295. Qin Yining's mind was full of twists and turns. After connecting all the things she had investigated about Xiaolian, an answer was already on the verge of being revealed. Qin Yining put the imperial jade seal into the wooden box and opened the letter with the words, "To Jin Xian," written on it. The content of the letter was very short, but it was very shocking. The general meaning of the letter was, "Peng Zhishi's troops are already at the city gates. I'm afraid I don't have much time left. I have committed countless sins in my life, and death is not to be regretted. I only feel sorry for Yongfu. Princess Yongfu is young and innocent. I sincerely ask Brother Lu to come and help. If you can help me, I will be deeply grateful and repay you in my next life." The signature was Zhou Weixian with a private seal next to it. Seeing Zhou Weixian's signature, how could Qin Yining still not understand? The surname of the Beiji kingdom was Zhou. The tyrant's courtesy name was Weixian. Because of this courtesy name, the tyrant was ridiculed by the people behind his back. They said that his name was Xian, but he was not Xian at all. From this, it could be concluded that Xiaolian should be Princess Yongfu. Her surname was Zhou, and her courtesy name was Xiaolian. And the uncle who died protecting Zhou Xiaolian should be Lu Jinxian, General Lu. Qin Yining put away the letter with a serious expression and put it back together with the imperial jade seal. She originally guessed that Xiaolian's background was not simple, but she never expected that she was a princess of the previous dynasty. Since they met in the mountains, it was fate. Qin Yining would never leave this cute little girl in the mountains to fend for herself. The mountains were full of dangers and wild beasts. She had lived in the mountains before, so she knew how difficult it was to survive. A child who lived in the mountains by herself at the age of 5 or 6 and lived until the age of 9 was safe and sound. She ate half-cooked food all day and was hungry and full like a little savage. It was already a miracle that she was not eaten by wild beasts and did not die of illness. Qin Yining could not guarantee that Zhou Xiaolian would be so lucky if she continued to live in the mountains. She must take her away. But the most difficult thing was her background. Zhou Xiaolian's father was the tyrant who killed Pang Zhao's father. In order to avenge his father, Pang Zhao killed the tyrant and destroyed the extremely absurd Beiji kingdom. In the eyes of the people, he was a hero, but in Zhou Xiaolian's eyes, he was an enemy. In Pang Zhao's eyes, Zhou Xiaolian was also the daughter of his enemy. Moreover, Zhou Xiaolian had the imperial jade seal of Beiji. He believed that De Zhou had been searching for this jade seal ever since the founding of the country. Qin Yining was not sure if Pang Zhao would spare Zhou Xiaolian's life after knowing that she was the princess of Beiji state. Even if Pang Zhao didn't kill her, what about Zhou Di? What about the others? No. Such a young child shouldn't have to bear the burden left behind by his father. Since she had met Zhou Xiaolian, she couldn't just stand by and watch. She had to take Zhou Xiaolian away and protect her. Even if she had to hide it from Pang Zhao, she couldn't let anyone know about her background. Just as Qin Yining was frowning and letting her imagination run wild, a rustling sound came from outside the wooden house. The door was pushed open, and Zhou Xiaolian walked in with a bloody hair and a net of sparrows that were flapping their wings and trying to escape. Her body was dirty, and she said happily, "Sister, eat." She seemed to have found that the wooden house was clean and tidy, and the floor was unprecedentedly clean. Zhou Xiaolian hurriedly took a few steps back and threw away the bloody prey. She even used her small feet in animal skin boots to rub the bloodstains on the floor. She smiled at Qin Yining. In the past, Uncle had taught her not to bring dirty things into the house and to keep the place clean. Even though Zhou Xiaolian was still young at that time, and even though she didn't care about these rules all these years, when she saw the clean and tidy floor now, she still remembered what Uncle had said. Qin Yining smiled and walked to Zhou Xiaolian. He pulled her to sit beside the fire and touched her hair that had not been washed for a long time. He smiled gently and said, "Xiaolian, you went hunting. You're amazing." Zhou Xiaolian was praised and smiled happily. "Sister, I'm hungry. Let's eat birds." "Okay, you stay here and keep warm. I'll go and clean up." Qin Yining got up and went to clean up the game. Zhou Xiaolian could not stay still and followed Qin Yining out. The two walked to a place further away and dug a hole in the snow before they started to clean up the hare and sparrows. After cleaning up the internal organs and washing them with snow water, Qin Yining buried the traces with snow as usual. Only then did he carry their food back to the house. Qin Yining found a small iron pot and a small bag of coarse salt in the room. She washed the pot, put it on the fire, and boiled a pot of rabbit soup with snow water. At the same time, she skewered the sparrows and roasted them. Zhou Xiaolian squatted beside her and stared at the food with sparkling eyes. Qin Yining asked, "Xiaolian, do you still remember the things that happened at home in the past?" Zhou Xiaolian was stunned when she heard this. She squinted her eyes and tried hard to remember. She slowly said, "At home, there were many people. We lived in a big house. There were older brothers and older sisters who played with me. We had candy and lotus seed porridge. We had a big yard and there were lotus flowers in the vats." Qin Yining laughed. "Do you still remember your father?" Zhou Xiaolian nodded. "Father. He was tall and had a beard. He pricked me with it and asked me to pull it out." Qin Yining's heart was filled with mixed feelings when he heard this. Everyone said that the tyrant of Beiji was cruel and heartless. Who would have thought that this tyrant, who had done all kinds of bad things, would actually allow his younger daughter to behave atrociously on him and pull out his beard? Qin Yining smiled and said, "Xiaolian, sister will be going home in a few days. I want to take you with me. You will follow me in the future, okay?" Zhou Xiaolian was stunned when she heard this. Then, large drops of tears gushed out from her eyes, leaving 2 marks on her dirty little face. "Sister won't go. Sister, I won't go. Seeing that she was crying, Qin Yining hurriedly pulled her to his side and wiped her tears with a handkerchief. Don't cry. Sister doesn't want to leave you behind. It's just that I have a family too. I have father and mother at home. If I go missing, they will be sad. Follow me home. You will be my younger sister in the future. I will take care of you, okay? Zhou Xiaolian choked with sobs. Uncle said that we can't go out. There are bad people outside. Qin Yining hugged the crying little girl in his arms and said, Don't be afraid. You will follow me in the future. I will definitely protect you. Moreover, my father is a very powerful person. He will also protect you. Follow me out and change your name. Don't tell others what your father looks like, don't tell others what your family looks like, and don't tell others what your uncle looks like. Then, no bad people will come looking for trouble with you, okay? Really? Zhou Xiaolian wiped her face with her sleeve. Her entire face was dirty like a little kitten. Her eyes were even brighter after crying. Of course. I won't lie to you. Qin Yining looked at her seriously. Chapter 296. Zhou Xiaolian bit her lips and looked at Qin Yining. She could see Qin Yining's concern and sincerity. Finally, she nodded. I'll listen to you, sister. Good. Qin Yining smiled and said, Then, you must promise to listen to me in the future. After we go out, you will stay by my side. I will teach you how to read and how to live in the outside world. You must also promise me that you won't leave me, okay? Okay. Zhou Xiaolian nodded heavily. Qin Yining thought for a while and said, Don't forget your roots. From now on, you will be called Lian Xiaozhou, okay? Lian Xiaozhou. Zhou Xiaolian's eyes widened. Lotus seed porridge. Qin Yining didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It's the Lian with the surname Lian. If anyone asks you in the future, you can say that your surname is Lian and that your father was a hunter in the mountains. He has passed away now. I met you in the mountains by chance and took you out. Your name is Xiaozhou, which is your original surname. In fact, I just reversed your name. Lian, my surname is Lian. Father is a hunter. My name is Xiaozhou, lotus seed porridge. Lotus seed porridge is delicious, so I'll call it lotus seed porridge. Qin Yining felt that he had lost to her. This child had a deep obsession with lotus seed porridge. But since she liked it, why not call her Lian Xiaozhou? Beiji had been destroyed, so Princess Yongfu and the tyrant's favorite little princess Zhou Xiaolian no longer existed in the world. The heavy past was a shackle to this child. Since he had decided to start over, he would give her a name that had nothing to do with the past. It might be a good thing for her to forget those memories. Okay, then from now on, you will be called Lian Xiaozhou. Lian as in lotus seed porridge. Zhou Xiaolian, who should now be called Lian Xiaozong, nodded her head heavily and smiled with her eyes curved. Qin Yining smiled and said, All right, let's eat first. When we're full, I'll boil some water for you to take a bath. She found a large wooden basin behind the house. It must have been specially prepared by the uncle in the past. Lian Xiaozhou chewed the moderately salty roasted sparrow and drank the rabbit soup, nodding repeatedly. Qin Yining did not know how the child had lived all these years. Anyway, he had prepared the bath water. Once the child entered the water turned completely black. Just to wash his hair, he used 3 big wooden basins of water. Wiping his body was needless to say. In any case, Qin Yining just kept adding firewood to the stove and bringing snow back. The water in the wooden tub was dirty, so she let Lian Xiaozhou wrap her cloak around her and wait for the water to boil before continuing to wash. After tossing and turning like this until the afternoon, a fair, tender, and beautiful child was standing in front of her. Because of malnutrition, the 9-year-old child looked like she was only 7 or 8 years old. Her hair was a bit yellow, but it was very soft and smooth. Her face was white and tender, and her round cat eyes were moist and bright. When she smiled, her eyes turned into crescents. There was also a pair of small dimples on her rosy cheeks, just like Qin Yining's. If people did not know, they would probably believe that Lian Xiaozhou was Qin Yining's biological sister. Qin Yining took out a few of the uncle's unlined clothes from the cloth bundle and temporarily gave them to Lian Xiaozhou to wear. She wrapped her own jacket tightly around her and let her play in the house by herself. After that, he washed the clothes that she was originally wearing from the inside out and hung them outside the house to dry. Then, he cleaned himself up as well. By the time she was done, it was already dark. Qin Yining heated the rabbit soup and the two of them ate together. Qin Yining used her 5 fingers as a comb and combed Lian Xiaozhou's hair. Children's hair was soft and smooth, so it was very easy to take care of. She combed Lian Xiaozhou's hair into 2 twisted braids, removed the light blue ribbon that decorated her skirt, and tied 2 beautiful bows on the ends of the braids. Lian Xiaozhou happily played with her own hair. She simply loved it so much that she could not bear to part with it. When they went to bed at night, Lian Xiaozhou snuggled into Qin Yining's arms. She hugged her and was unwilling to let go. She kept saying, "Hello, older sister. I like older sister." Qin Yining's heart softened when he heard this. He was even more determined to keep her identity a secret. He could not allow anything that could threaten her safety to happen. 2 days later, Lian Xiaozhou's clothes were completely dry. Qin Yining dressed her properly and wrapped her in a clean animal skin. Lian Xiaozhou, who was not afraid of the cold, took Qin Yining to hunt in the mountains. When Qin Yining and Lian Xiaozhou were hunting, they constantly paid attention to their surroundings to see if anyone had left any traces behind. After confirming that the pursuers were not nearby, she used the few times she went out to bring back the skeletons of the uncle and the other 3 Zhou dynasty soldiers. She buried them in the forest downwind behind the house. "Little Kanji, we should leave this place." This morning, Qin Yining solemnly said to Lian Xiaozhou, "Before we leave, I must burn everything here, including the secrets of your past. This is because I cannot let anyone have the opportunity to find out about your past." Lian Xiaozhou nodded. She did not have any objections. She had been very happy with Qin Yining these past few days. She also knew that Qin Yining was sincerely doing this for her own good. Qin Yining and Lian Xiaozhou packed up their luggage. In the end, Qin Yining burned the letter that the tyrant had written to the uncle. He used a machete to dig out the frozen soil at the corner of the wooden house. After spending a lot of effort, he dug a deep hole and buried the imperial jade seal in it. Then, he set the wooden house on fire. Lian Xiaozhou pulled Qin Yining's hand and pointed at the wooden house anxiously. "Sister, there's a fire." "Yes. Don't be afraid. It's snowing heavily now. Although the fire will burn, it won't destroy the entire forest. Also, I've observed that the wind has been blowing from the northwest recently. As long as we face the wind, the fire won't burn us. Sister, you've been in the mountains for so many days. There must be people outside looking for me. The bad guys who wanted to kidnap me must have retreated by now. Sister's family will know that I'm here when they see so much smoke." Lian Xiaozhou did not understand half of what Qin Yining was saying, but she still nodded obediently. Qin Yining watched as the entire wooden house was set ablaze. Even the forest where she had buried the 4 corpses was burning. She could finally relax a little. Although she had caused a forest fire, she felt very sorry for the small animals in the mountains. However, in order to save Lian Xiaozhou's life, she had to destroy all evidence that could expose her past. This included the uncle, the 3 soldiers, the military uniforms, the letter, and the Imperial Jade Seal. The Imperial Jade Seal could not be destroyed by fire. Qin Yining also could not carry the Imperial Jade Seal with her. If she did not need it in the future, then it might not be a bad thing to leave the Imperial Jade Seal in the mountains. If she needed it in the future, it would not be difficult to find the origin of the fire. She would be able to get the Imperial Jade Seal by digging up the wooden house. Qin Yining had already planned everything properly. After confirming that there was nothing left out, she brought Lian Xiaozhou to hide. At the same time, Pang Xiao, who had been searching in the mountains for 5 or 6 days, looked in the direction of the billowing black smoke and finally revealed a relieved smile. Chapter 297. Qin Yining hid behind a bush with Lian Xiaozhou. Listening to the crackling sounds of the burning trees, she felt an indescribable sense of fear and loneliness in her heart. Qin Yining had lived in the mountains before, so she had feelings for every blade of grass and tree in the mountains. She even felt that the grass and trees had life and intelligence. If this fire were to burn down a lot of grass and trees, who knew how many small animals would suffer? But in order to protect Lian Xiaozhou, she had no choice but to do this. Holding Lian Xiaozhou's warm little hand tightly, Qin Yining began to understand Pang Xiao's many difficulties. In order to protect this child, she set fire to the mountain, but she still felt uneasy. When Pang Xiao fought and killed for the peace of the world, for the future of the majority of people, she probably felt even worse than she did, right? Just as she was thinking about this, Qin Yining suddenly heard the sound of whistling arrows piercing through the air from afar. She hurriedly stood up. Before she could react, whistling arrows responded from more than a dozen directions around her. Qin Yining guessed that these should be search and rescue teams coming into the mountains. But she didn't expect there to be so many search teams. Perhaps it was because she had never seen so many whistling arrows suddenly sounding from afar, so Lian Xiaozhou was quite frightened. Her little hand clutched Qin Yining's sleeve tightly, and she nervously called out to her sister. Qin Yining stroked her head to comfort her and said with a smile, "Don't be afraid. These are people looking for us. They're here to bring sister home." Lian Xiaozhou didn't quite understand, so she said, "Sister's home? Someone's here." "Yes, so you don't have to be afraid." "I'm not afraid." Lian Xiaozhou nodded heavily, but she didn't loosen her grip on Qin Yining's sleeve at all. Obviously, she was still very scared. In fact, Qin Yining was also a little nervous. She was also afraid that the pursuers hadn't all left yet, and she would attract the fire. Not long after, Qin Yining and Lian Xiaozhou heard footsteps approaching them at the same time. The sound of footsteps on the snow and dried branches was very crisp, as if they were directly stepping on their hearts. The two of them held their breaths, hid behind the bushes, not daring to come out. Through the gaps between the branches and leaves, Qin Yining saw that the leader was a skinny young man with a slightly hunched back. This man was actually wearing the uniform of the Tiger Army. The 10 or so people following behind him were all dressed as Tiger Army soldiers. How could this be? The Tiger Army had already been ordered to return to the capital of the Zhou dynasty. How could they appear in the mountains? Could it be that Pang Xiao knew that the surrendered minister's troops were attacked on the way, so he came here specifically? Just as Qin Yining's heart was in turmoil, the leader of the group shouted in a hoarse voice, "The Tiger Army is here on Prince Zhongshuan's orders to look for heir by." He repeated this sentence 10 times. The soldier next to him took his place and shouted another 10 times. Then, the next person took his place. One by one, the Tiger Army searched and shouted at the top of their lungs. Qin Yining finally felt relieved. His heart was full of joy and gratitude. He didn't expect that Pang Shao would send the tiger army to look for her. He was afraid that she wouldn't recognize him, so he used this kind of secret signal. Qin Yining pulled Lian Xiaozhou's hand and left the bushes. As soon as she moved, the searching soldiers immediately noticed her and hurriedly turned to look at her. The leader of the group immediately came forward and bowed. "You are Miss Qin." The young man's facial features were very ordinary, but his eyes were very sharp. When he looked at Qin Yining, he was sizing her up and scrutinizing her. However, Qin Yining didn't sense any hostility. "That's me. Where's Wang Yi?" Qin Yining hugged Lian Xiaozhou's shoulder and patted her comfortingly. The young man glanced at Lian Xiaozhou again. Then, he bowed and said respectfully, "Miss Qin, please come with us." As he spoke, he instructed the person next to him, "Fire the whistling arrow." That person immediately fired another whistling arrow. Not long after, the sound of a whistling arrow could be heard from the northeast, far away from here. The young man smiled and said, "Miss Qin, please." Qin Yining was puzzled, but he didn't show it on his face and nodded. With the protection of the 10 people around them, Qin Yining and Lian Xiaozhou didn't have to worry about being attacked by wild beasts, let alone being ambushed by pursuing soldiers. Therefore, their journey was very smooth. When they reached the foot of the mountain, the young lieutenant looked into the distance and pointed in the direction of smoke rising from behind the mountain. He smiled and said, "Miss Qin, please come with me. It seems that the search team has already gathered there." Qin Yining nodded and asked in puzzlement, "Why didn't Wang Yi personally come to find me?" The young man looked around and said in a low voice, "After Wang Yi returned to the capital, Your Majesty empathized with Wang Yi's hard work and granted Wang Yi 100 mu of fertile land, 100 taels of gold, 10 beautiful women, and gave him a month's leave. He also ordered Wang Yi to hand over the Tiger Army's Tiger Tally. The current commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army is Sui Jinwei, official Zhua." When Qin Yining heard this, he stopped in his tracks and said in a low voice, "Your Majesty stripped Wang Yi of his military power." When the 10 or so Tiger Army soldiers saw that the two of them had something to say, they retreated 10 or so steps and followed them from a distance. The young man nodded solemnly. "After the birds are gone, the bow is put away." Qin Yining pursed his lips and said with a frown, "Then why did the Tiger Army come here this time? I remember that the Tiger Army has already returned to the capital. If there aren't any accidents, they should already be in the capital at this time. Did Your Majesty order the Tiger Army to come here?" The young man shook his head. "It wasn't Your Majesty's order. It was Wang Yi who privately mobilized his troops to come here in search of a spy. Heavens, he's crazy. They were already afraid of him to begin with. Privately mobilizing his troops is the same as giving someone else something to use against him. What about Wang Yi? Where is he now?" The young man looked at Qin Yining with a different gaze than before. It seemed that the woman Wang Yi had his eyes on wasn't an idiot. Miss Qin is right. In fact, Wang Yi was originally resting at home. When he heard that Marquis North Dingbei had suddenly brought people to attack the officials of the Yan dynasty who had surrendered to Dezhou, he was extremely anxious. However, he had no one else he could use, so he claimed that he was sick. In reality, he personally dispatched people from the army to search for you and your family. Although the Tiger Army's commander's seal was in the hands of official Zhua, all the brothers in the army were only convinced by Wang Yi. Wang Yi only said one sentence, and everyone followed him. The Tiger Army had a total of 100,000 soldiers. Wang Yi brought 20,000 of them. Official Zhou was afraid that he wouldn't be able to report back to Your Majesty, so he hurriedly followed him. When he left the capital, official Zhou wrote a letter to accuse Wang Yi of secretly mobilizing his troops with the intention of rebelling. This letter was stopped by Wang Yi's people. A few days ago, officials sent another letter to accuse Wang Yi, but this letter was also stopped by our people. However, because Wang Yi secretly mobilized his troops, if it was exposed, it would be no different from rebelling. Therefore, Wang Yi has been hiding his tracks along the way. He didn't meet officials so officials didn't have any direct evidence. Therefore, when Miss Qin sees officials later, please be careful not to let your mouth slip. His Highness led his men to rush here day and night. They searched the area for 5 or 6 days, but they didn't find you. Instead, they found a lot of other people who were scattered around. When they found that there was a big fire in the mountains, Wang Yi said that you must be here, so he ordered our team to look for you. During this time, he contacted us with a whistling arrow and confirmed that we had found you. Wang Yi didn't have time to meet you, so he quickly rushed back. This time, Wang Yi claimed to be seriously ill and closed his door to deceive others. Although officials' letter was intercepted, Your Majesty might have found out about this through other channels. If Your Majesty wanted to expose Wang Yi, then the reason of his serious illness wouldn't be able to stop Your Majesty. Wang Yi was worried that Your Majesty would search the mansion, so he hurried back. At this point, the young man looked at Qin Yining with a bit of resentment. He almost pointed at Qin Yining's nose and scolded him for being a femme fatale. Qin Yining's face was also a bit hot. It wasn't because he was ashamed, but more because he was touched. She knew that Pang Xiao had always liked her. When he was with her, Pang Xiao would change his cold and distant attitude to others. Instead, he would be as passionate as a ball of fire. He had never avoided his feelings for her, but Qin Yining didn't expect him to care about her to this extent. It was to the extent that in order to find her, he was willing to bear the charges of disobeying the imperial edict and plotting a rebellion to bring soldiers to find her. She really didn't expect that Pang Xiao would do so much to find her. He had been stripped of his military power and was already in a difficult situation. Now, in order to find her, he had dug a deeper hole for himself and jumped into it. How could he do so much for her? He was so affectionate that she felt that if she didn't burn herself in this relationship, she wouldn't be able to face Pang Xiao's sacrifice for her. Qin Yining pursed his lips and took a few deep breaths to calm the agitation in his heart. He said seriously, "May I ask who this young general is by Wang Ye's side? From the way you speak, you don't seem like a deputy general. It's not a waste of your talent to be Wang Ye's strategist." The young man was stunned when he heard this, then he smiled and said, "Miss Qin has good eyes." This time, his voice didn't sound like a young man's. It was clearly a hoarse old man. "This old man is Xiaoyu, and my courtesy name is Hongchang. I'm Wang Ye's strategist and have been by Wang Ye's side for 5 years. As I'm good at scheming and disguising, Wang Yi brought this old man out this time." Wang Yi was worried that others wouldn't be able to explain it to you clearly and cause you to misunderstand. He was also afraid that some things in Dezhou wouldn't be explained clearly to others, so he specially instructed this old man to follow Miss Qin and help you clear up any doubts. Qin Yining looked at his young face curiously and nodded with a smile. "So it's Mr. Xia. My apologies for not recognizing you. You flatter me." Then he reverted to his slightly hoarse voice. "Miss Qin, you should return to the camp first. When you see officials later, you don't have to say anything." Qin Yining waved his hand and said, "There's no hurry. I already know the current situation. It won't be too late for us to return after we think of a countermeasure. It won't be convenient to talk about this after we return to the camp." When Xiaoyu saw Qin Yining's reaction, he asked in surprise, "Does Miss Qin have a plan?" Qin Yining said, "I do have some ideas, and I need your advice. I'd like to hear the details." Xiaoyu cupped his hands. Qin Yining said, "Since Your Majesty promoted officials Wu Jinwei to be the new commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army, he definitely isn't a stupid person. His secret report didn't receive any response from the Emperor, so he must be suspicious and will report it again. This time, don't stop him. Chapter 298. The brave tiger army is the result of His Royal Highness's hard work for many years. I can't let others take it away for no reason. Qin Yining slightly raised the corner of her mouth. Her almond-shaped eyes were full of confidence. It was frightening. Her confident look reminded Xia Yu of Wang Yi, who was rushing back to the capital. Xia Yu's expression became more serious. Qin Yining continued, "It's not easy to train one person, let alone an army of 100,000. The tiger army is not only good at individual combat, but it's also good at formations and strict in its management. Such a fierce army can be used as a shield to protect Wang Yi, but in the hands of others, it can be used as a weapon to kill. Is Master Zhuo really that capable? I think he just won Your Majesty's heart. I want him to lose His Majesty's heart." "Miss Qin, what do you mean?" "Wang Yi is rushing back to the capital to continue pretending to be sick. It's too risky for him to use this method. Even if he is lucky enough to pass this time, Your Majesty already knows about Wang Yi's deployment of troops. It's just that he hasn't caught it yet. He's already worried about it. If that happens, I'm afraid that the Emperor's wariness and schemes against Your Highness will only increase. But it's already happened. Could it be that Miss Qin has thought of a countermeasure? Is it related to the report you just mentioned about letting Zhuo Jinwei go?" "Yes." Qin Yining smiled slyly. She called Xia Yu over and whispered a few words to her. The more Xia Yu listened, the bigger her eyes widened. In the end, she looked at Qin Yining with admiration. Miss Qin is indeed the daughter of the wise Panin. I'm ashamed of my inferiority. Don't say that. I still have to rely on Mr. Xie's disguise skills. It's just a small trick. If I can help Wang Yi, then I didn't learn it for nothing." Qin Yining nodded with a smile. Xia Yu smiled as she thought about Qin Yining's plan. Her resentment towards Qin Yining was swept away, and her attitude towards Qin Yining became extremely respectful. Qin Yining and the others didn't go back immediately. Instead, they asked Xia Yu to disguise her. She disguised herself as an ordinary-looking young man and changed into the Tiger Army uniform. Lian Xiaozhou was very surprised. She couldn't help but pull the hand of the strange young man in front of her. Qin Yining smiled comfortingly and said, "Little Kanji, be good. There are bad people who want to scheme against me now, so I have no choice but to disguise myself like this. When we enter the military camp later, you have to pretend that you don't know me in front of outsiders. You can't call out my name, okay?" Lian Xiaozhou nodded repeatedly when she heard this. She covered her mouth with both hands and deliberately looked away from Qin Yining. "I won't say it." Qin Yining was amused by her childish and cute behavior. He patted her head and said, "Good girl. When we reach the military camp and there's no one else, you can follow me. For now, you can follow this uncle. If someone asks you who you are, you should know how to answer, right?" Lian Xiaozhou nodded heavily. "I know." Qin Yining blended in with the Tiger Army team that was searching the mountain and returned to the military camp. The team only found a little girl from a hunter's family. They didn't find the person Prince Zhongshuan was thinking about. Zhuo Jinwei had already seen the fire on the mountain and heard the dozens of arrows. He had been standing at the entrance of the military camp with his arms crossed as he coldly watched the Tiger Army team that treated him like air. Prince Zhongshuan was so capable. Your Majesty stripped him of his military power and handed the Tiger Army over to him. Peng Zhishi actually dared to defy the imperial edict and privately mobilize troops. He even dared to meddle in his army. Your Majesty still hadn't replied to his report. The more Sui Jinwei thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. He urged his trusted aide beside him. Quickly send another report on Pang Zhishi's private mobilization of troops. Yes. General. The trusted aide immediately obeyed the order. Looking at the orderly tiger troop in the tent, Sui Jinwei looked around the camp and sneered. How did Pang Zhishi end up here? He didn't know which tent he was hiding in. If he was caught, he would definitely be in trouble. Sui Jinwei thought of this and felt a burst of pride. In the evening, Sui Jinwei ordered people to prepare food and wine. When he was drinking by himself, a deputy general suddenly came to the front of the tent to report. General. Prince Zhongshuan wants to see you. Sui Jinwei stood up abruptly. He didn't even realize that his wine bag had fallen. How strange. Isn't he hiding very well? Why would he want to see me? I don't know. However, when I came here, I saw that Prince Zhongshuan seemed to be seriously ill. His complexion was very bad. Seriously ill. Could it be that he was thinking about his mistress and couldn't find her after so many days, so he got sick from worry? Sui Jinwei laughed mockingly. The murderous Pang Zhishi is actually infatuated with love. How unexpected. Ha ha ha. Sui Jinwei's wild laughter could be heard far away from the tent. He had been suppressing himself for too long and finally found a chance to vent. Good. I want to see what kind of tricks he wants to play. He was avoiding me before, but now he wants to see me. When the deputy general saw Sui Jinwei's excited expression, he smiled and said, perhaps that person has something he can't do and wants to ask for your help. Oh. Sui Jinwei thought for a moment and associated it with your majesty. Pang Shao must know that his private deployment of troops would definitely anger your majesty. He's afraid of your majesty's thunderous might, so he wants to ask for your help to put in a few good words for him. With this thought, Sui Jinwei left the tent with the deputy general. The deputy general led him to the tent where Pang Shao lived. As soon as he opened the tent door, he smelled a bitter smell of medicine. Pang Shao was lying on the camp bed. His hair was messy and his complexion was very bad. His body was wrapped in 3 layers of thick quilts, but he still looked very cold. A thin and slightly hunchbacked young deputy general stood by the side to serve him. He used a handkerchief to cover Pang Zhao's forehead. Sui Jinwei restrained his arrogance and saluted. This general pays his respects to Wang Yi. I haven't seen Wang Yi in the army these days. I thought Wang Yi was hiding from this general. As he spoke, Sui Jinwei couldn't help but smile mockingly. Pang Shao, who stepped on the bed, shook his head weakly. This king was originally ordered by your majesty to lead the troops out for training. Who knew that he would be seriously ill here and can't do the training? Now this king has the heart but is powerless. Next, I'll have to trouble Left General to lead these troops back to the capital. His voice was so hoarse that it didn't sound like a human's voice. His voice was also very weak. As soon as he finished speaking, he coughed and his face looked even paler. Sui Jinwei laughed in his heart. It would be good if this person fell sick and died. But he still showed a concerned expression. Wang Yi, you must take care of your health. Leave the matter of returning to the capital to this official. If that's the case, thank you very much. He coughed again. Sui Jinwei didn't want to smell the medicine, so he simply left the room. The accompanying deputy general also followed him out of the tent. Sui Jinwei relaxed and laughed all the way back to his tent. It's really funny. At this time, the one surnamed Shao still doesn't repent. What do you mean by leading the troops to train under the imperial edict? He's simply trying to deceive this general. He's falsifying the imperial edict. Yes, I didn't expect Prince Zhongshuan to be so bold. He disobeyed the imperial edict and secretly mobilized the troops. Now he's falsifying the imperial edict. I think he's simply plotting rebellion. Zhuo Jinwei nodded heavily. This won't do. Since this general has discovered his wild ambitions, he can't be tolerated. This matter must be reported to your majesty. Zhuo Jinwei went to prepare brush and ink and quickly wrote a secret report. He described in detail the scene of Pang Zhao's falsification of the imperial edict to your majesty. At the end, he said, Prince Zhongshuan is arrogant and has ulterior motives. He thinks he's the commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army. He privately mobilized the troops and falsified the imperial edict to gloss over the issue. He's simply looking down on your majesty. I hope that your majesty will take precautions early. He put down the brush and sealed the letter with wax. Then he ordered someone to send it to the capital. This time, your majesty can't tolerate him. Zhuo Jinwei felt very satisfied. He happily drank a cup of wine and laughed again. At this time in the tent, Pang Zhao had already lifted the 3 layers of heavy quilts. He got off the bed and looked at his reflection in the water basin for a moment. Then he turned around and said to Xiaoyu, Teacher Xia is very talented. I didn't expect your disguise technique to be so superb. Moreover, you can change your voice after taking the medicine. The person who had met Zhuo Jinwei just now and made up some nonsense about training under the imperial edict was naturally Qin Yining, who had disguised himself as Pang Zhao. Xiaoyu waved her hand and said modestly, You flatter me. This is just a smokescreen. Fortunately, you've been lying down the whole time. If you sat up, you'd be exposed. Height can't be deceived. Qin Yining smiled and said, It doesn't matter. When we depart, I'll say that I'm sick and take a carriage back to the capital. Judging from General Zhuo's expression just now, I think that the secret report accusing Wang Yi of falsifying the imperial edict has already been sent out. Yes. Xiaoyu smiled and said, I specially ordered people not to intercept him. The 2 secret reports have already been sent out. In this way, Zhuo Jinwei has already stepped into your trap. Qin Yining said, Your Majesty is a cautious person. He won't act rashly if he's not completely sure. Therefore, even if he receives the news, he won't easily search the Wang mansion in order to avoid falling into a trap. When the second report comes in, Your Majesty is even more certain that Wang Yi isn't in the Wang mansion. He will definitely wait for Wang Yi to be caught red-handed. Your Majesty has a well-thought-out plan. The time he waits for is just right for us to use. Exactly. Xiaoyu praised, Miss Qin, you're really a good schemer. The time Your Majesty waits is enough for Wang Yi to rush back to the Wang mansion and continue to pretend to be sick. Even if Your Majesty really searches the Wang mansion, we'll be absolutely safe. And if Your Majesty doesn't search the Wang mansion and believes in Zhuo Jinwei's second report and believes that Wang Yi is in the military camp, he will definitely wait for the 20,000 Tiger Army to return to the capital and arrest Wang Yi in the military camp. He will catch him for secretly deploying troops. But how can I let them capture Wang Yi in the military camp? When we reach the capital, I will remove my disguise. Even if they turn the military camp upside down, they won't be able to find me. At that time, it's still unknown who will be the one deceiving the emperor. Qin Yining sneered. If she didn't protect the person she had set her mind on, should she wait for someone else to protect her? If someone wanted to scheme against Pang Zhao, they would have to go through her first. Zhuo Jinwei wanted to take advantage of the Tiger Army. He had to have the ability to do so. Xiaoyu was already prostrating herself in admiration. She respectfully bowed to Qin Yining. Wang Yi was originally in a hurry and didn't have time to think deeply. Now that we have Miss Qin's scheme, we'll be absolutely safe. Chapter 299. Zhuge Jinwei led 20,000 soldiers of the brave Tiger Army, and brought along the family members of those surrendered ministers of Great Yan who were rescued and brought back to the capital city in a grandiose manner. Throughout the journey, he was in high spirits, as he kept his eyes fixed on the coach of Pang Shao, fearing that the cunning fellow would run away halfway. However, Pang Shao was well behaved. Perhaps because he was seriously ill, he didn't get out of the carriage. Only a young lieutenant followed him. The person who served the medicine was a 7 or 8-year-old girl that the Tiger Army had just rescued from the mountains. Zhuge Jinwei once asked the little girl to come closer and ask her questions. Who knew that the little girl was mute and could only look at people timidly? She had the silly air of a simple mountain person. Zhuge Jinwei had no interest in interrogating such a child. At the same time, in the capital, the Emperor of Zhou, Li Qitian, read the second secret report from Zhuge Jinwei. He almost couldn't suppress his anger. He threw the report on the table and picked up the white porcelain teacup on his left hand. However, his trembling hand shook the lid of the teacup and almost spilled the tea. Li Qitian angrily threw the teacup on the ground again. Who made the tea? It's so hot, how can I eat it? Your Majesty, please forgive us. The palace maid on the side immediately knelt down and kowtowed. In fact, everyone knew that the tea couldn't have been hot. They served Your Majesty, so naturally, they had to take care of these trivial matters. The tea should be 60% or 70% hot, just right for the mouth. Your Majesty is like this because he encountered something unpleasant and took out his anger. The head eunuch Li Guanwen immediately came forward and bowed. Your Majesty, please calm down. It's this servant's negligence. He turned around and glared at the palace maid. Get out and receive your punishment. The palace maid was immediately scared out of her wits and almost fell to the ground. For her, this was simply a bolt from the blue, an unexpected disaster. But how could the palace maid dare to have other thoughts? If she said too much, she might even lose her life to receive the punishment. Forget it, it's not a big deal. Li Qitian calmed down and sighed. You can all leave. Li Guanwen, stay. Yes, thank you for Your Majesty's kindness. The palace maid breathed a sigh of relief and kowtowed 3 times in a row with tears of gratitude. Only then did she leave respectfully. The eunuchs and maids who served in the imperial study were all Li Qitian's trusted aides. His personal space must be guarded by people he trusted. Otherwise, even if he was in his own territory, he would not be able to completely relax. What he did today was also a way to win over people's hearts. Li Qitian was used to giving a sweet date after giving a slap. Li Guanwen had already figured out His Majesty's temperament and was already used to it. When the others left in a line and only Li Qitian and Li Guanwen were left in the imperial study, Li Qitian said, Do you know the contents of the memorial? Li Guanwen smiled and brought Li Qitian a new cup of tea. He said with a smile, Your Majesty is asking. This servant only knows to serve Your Majesty all day long. How could I know what's going on outside? If Your Majesty wants this servant to know, then this servant will naturally know. Li Qitian threw the memorial to Li Guanwen and said, You old fox, take a look. Li Guanwen hurriedly picked up the memorial with both hands and read it carefully. Then, he turned pale with fright and said, This Prince Zhongshuan, could it be that he wants to rebel? None of these people are willing to let me be at ease. They all think that I'm a soft persimmon that's easy to bully. The commander's seal of the Tiger Army has already been handed over to me, yet he still dares to act like this. Li Guanwen hurriedly bowed and didn't dare to say anything more. It wasn't until he was sure that Your Majesty's anger had subsided a little that he said, It seems that Prince Zhongshuan is sincere to the young lady of the family Qin. Prince Zhongshuan was so anxious that he didn't even care about Your Majesty's order. He just led his men and horses to rescue them. It seems that since ancient times, heroes have a weakness for the charms of beautiful women. This is true. Listening to the eunuch's analysis of heroes have a weakness for the charms of beautiful women in front of him, Li Qitian couldn't help but laugh. A eunuch like you knows a lot. Li Guanwen smiled shyly and changed the topic. Your Majesty, the Tiger Army is now stationed outside the city. It's really too dangerous. You should also make preparations early. Li Qitian pondered for a moment. His usually amiable face revealed an amiable smile. Where is Ji Lan right now? Replying to Your Majesty, Marquis Dingbei is still kneeling outside, reflecting on his actions. He has been kneeling for a day and a night. Li Qitian sighed and said, although he acted rashly this time and caused a big mess for me, Ji Lan is still sincere to me. He even knew to rush back to the capital to apologize to me. Tell him to stop kneeling and come in to see me. Yes. This servant will go right away. Li Guanwen bowed and retreated. When he arrived outside the imperial study, he helped Ji Ziyu up from his kneeling position. He first ordered a small eunuch to massage Ji Ziyu's legs and apply ointment to his bruised knees. Only then did he respectfully say, Marquis, Your Majesty invites you in to talk. Ji Ziyu inwardly sighed in relief. With a cold expression, he said thank you to Li Guanwen before entering the imperial study. Li Guanwen originally wanted to go in to serve, but Your Majesty didn't allow anyone to serve from the side. Thus, they didn't know what Your Majesty and Ji Ziyu were talking about. At this time, Peng Shao, who had secretly returned to Prince Zhongshuan's residence, had already learned that Ji Ziyu had also returned to the capital to apologize to the emperor. Peng Shao furrowed his brows and didn't say a word for a long time. Huzi said, Wang Yi, you really took too much of a risk this time. Even if it was for fourth young lady, you can't. Although you rush back now. That doesn't mean that Your Majesty doesn't know anything. Since Your Majesty knows everything, he will definitely take the opportunity to give you a big blow. What will you do when the time comes? How could Pang Shao not understand this logic? It was just that when he had a strong desire to do something, the consequences were no longer important. At least now he could be sure that Qin Yining was still alive and not a corpse like he had been seeing in his nightmares these days. Pang Shao wasn't afraid of anything except for Qin Yining being wronged and hurt. But this time, he didn't consider everything. Pang Shao didn't expect that Ji Ziyu would be so impulsive as to go against the imperial edict and bring people to kill him. But when he thought about it carefully, Pang Shao felt bitter. Was Ji Ziyu's action really just to help him take revenge? From his understanding of Ji Ziyu, he knew that Ji Ziyu was scheming and smart. He was comparable to Your Majesty. As the commander-in-chief of the Dragon Legion, he dominated the north and suppressed the Taitan. How could such a brave and smart person do something so impulsive? Pang Shao didn't need to think carefully to know that Ji Ziyu was killing two birds with one stone. But he didn't want to use his darkest thoughts to figure out his brother. Pang Shao didn't care about the rumors outside. After talking to his mother, grandfather, and grandmother, he continued to pretend to be sick. The brave tiger army finally arrived at the capital after a long and arduous journey in the snow. When Li Qitian heard that Zhuge Jinwei had brought people back, he immediately ordered the 5 battalions, the God Machine Battalion, and the 3,000 battalions, as well as Ji Ziyu's 10,000 Dragon Legion soldiers to block the 20,000 Tiger Legion soldiers outside the city gates. Chapter 300. Zhuge Jinwei learned of the situation the moment the troops were intercepted. He was filled with excitement and anticipation. Your Majesty should have received his report, right? Pang Zhishi's achievements were so great that they shocked Your Majesty, and he did not know how to restrain himself. He had just taken control of the brave Tiger Army's Tiger Tally, yet he was already able to grasp such a huge handle on His Majesty's dawn. Regardless of how the reward was going to be, his position in His Majesty's heart was going to be upgraded by a step. Weren't those bastards in the Tiger Army not convinced of him? Weren't they willing to go through water and tread on fire with just a word from Pang Zhishi? He was going to show them who was the real commander of their army. Zhuge Jinwei rode his horse forward in high spirits and ordered the troops to wait in place. The 5 battalions, the Divine Arms Battalion, the 3,000 battalions, and the 10,000 Dragon Stallion Army had formed a huge formation in front of the city gates. The commoners did not panic when they saw the troops gathered here. This was because the Tiger Army and the Dragon Stallion Army had returned to the capital. There were camps outside the city, and soldiers were often seen entering the city. However, a situation like this where the troops were facing off in front of the city gates was unprecedented. At this moment, there was a commotion outside the city gates. Zhuge Jinwei sat on his horse and curiously craned his neck to look at the city gates. He saw the newly appointed Minister of Justice, Qi Rugong, leading a group of people out of the city gates. He ordered the soldiers guarding the city, watch the city gates. Today, all the city gates in the capital are only open for exits. No one is allowed to enter. Yes. The situation outside was so tense that the soldiers guarding the city did not know what was going on. They were afraid that they would delay the important matter, so they quickly passed the message to the various city gates. Zhuge Jinwei clenched his fist excitedly. This way, Pang Zhishi would not be able to sneak into the city. When Your Majesty held him accountable, he would not be able to shirk responsibility. Zhuge Jinwei also hurriedly turned around and gave his lieutenant a look. The deputy understood and said in a low voice, "I've already watched the carriage. He's still sick inside." Zhuge Jinwei nodded in satisfaction. He dismounted from his horse and walked forward with a puzzled and angry expression. "What is the meaning of this, Lord Qi?" Qi Rugong looked down at Zhuge Jinwei and paused for a moment before dismounting. Zhuge Jinwei secretly cursed Qi Rugong for being a treacherous person. There had always been a gap between Qi Rugong, who had surrendered to Beiji, and Zhuge Jinwei, who had followed Your Majesty to conquer the world. However, the conflict between the surrendered officials of Beiji and Pang Zhishi was even greater. Wasn't Qi Rugong here today a knife to kill Pang Zhishi? Zhuge Jinwei suppressed his anger and said calmly, "Lord Qi closed the city gates. Are you trying to keep the Tiger Army out? Aren't you being too unreasonable by doing this?" Qi Rugong looked at Zhuge Jinwei's excellent performance as a commander who only cared about his troops and felt a wave of disdain in his heart. He cupped his hands and said, "Lord Zhuge, there is no need to worry. I am here today because of Prince Zhongshuan's private mobilization of troops." The moment he said this, the surroundings fell into silence. In the Dezhou dynasty, Prince Zhongshuan's reputation as Pang Shao was too well known. This was especially true in the capital. This was because Pang Shao was the one who conquered Beiji's capital. In the eyes of the enemy, he was a fiend. In the eyes of his own people, he was an undefeated war god. Because the city gates were blocked, more and more commoners stayed around. Everyone looked at the scene in front of the city gates curiously. With so many people watching, Zhuge Jinwei used a lot of effort to not show any gloating expression on his face. Zhuge Jinwei pretended to be confused and said, "Prince Zhongshuan's private mobilization of troops. But Prince Zhongshuan told me that he was following Your Majesty's orders to train 20,000 soldiers." This time, there was an uproar. If the Ministry of Justice's private mobilization of troops was true, then Prince Zhongshuan's words to the current commander of the Tiger Army about following Your Majesty's orders to train was obviously a fake imperial edict. Many people already knew that Pang Zhishi was no longer the commander of the Tiger Army. Privately mobilizing troops without a commander's seal could be seen as treason. Now, not only did he privately mobilize troops, he even lied to the current commander of the Tiger Army. In this way, disobeying an imperial edict, mobilizing troops to commit treason, and faking an imperial edict were the three major charges. This person was definitely going to die. In the crowd, the commoners were discussing. The Tiger Army soldiers had serious expressions on their faces. The scene became chaotic again. The discussion became louder and louder. It was going to develop into an uncontrollable situation. Seeing this, Zhuo Jinwei laughed in his heart. However, his expression was very serious. Lord Qi, you must understand that this is not a small matter. If you don't have evidence, don't speak carelessly. Don't wrongly accuse Prince Zhongshuan. The Ministry of Justice's Qi Rugong was an old official of Beiji. In his heart, he looked down on both Pang Xiao and Zhuo Jinwei. Therefore, he didn't have the patience to speak at this time. No evidence. Didn't the Left General's secret report say that Prince Zhongshuan privately mobilized troops and then lied that he was following Your Majesty's orders to train troops? You were the one who brought the evidence. This official only knew the clues and came out to arrest a rebellious official. Why are you playing riddles with this official? In one sentence, he revealed Zhuo Jinwei's secret report to the Tiger Army. Zhuo Jinwei instantly felt countless pairs of eyes staring at him from behind. If eyes could materialize, he would probably be killed by the gazes of the Tiger Army behind him. He was also a little embarrassed that he was exposed. However, now was the time to be busy with serious matters. Therefore, he didn't waste energy arguing with Qi Rugong. He only said, "This general is just stating the facts. As a subject of Your Majesty, I must do my duty well. I must not do anything to deceive Your Majesty. Since Lord Qi is here, then let's do things according to the Ministry of Justice's rules. In order to avoid suspicion, I won't interfere in today's matter, nor will I stop you." After finishing his words, Zhuo Jinwei retreated to the side. Qi Rugong glanced at Zhuo Jinwei from the corner of his eyes and ordered the people beside him, "Go and invite Prince Zhongshuan out." Yes. The people who came with Sun Qi Rugong were originally Beiji's surrendered subjects. These people all had grudges against Pang Xiao. Naturally, they didn't want to let Pang Xiao have an easy time. Therefore, as soon as Qi Rugong gave the order, these people immediately led people to conduct a carpet search and went straight to the 20,000 people returning today. At the same time, among the crowd of onlookers, the Emperor of Zhou, Li Qitian, was wearing a dark green cotton cloak. He hid among the crowd with the head eunuch, Li Guanwen, and craned his neck to watch the show. Li Qitian's heart was no less excited than Zhuo Jinwei's. Since he had set up such a big scene today, he wanted to make Pang Xiao's crime of defying the imperial edict and deceiving the emperor known to the world. At that time, even if he killed Pang Zhishi, no one would say that he was afraid of the meritorious officials who had served him well. Instead, they would say that Pang Zhishi didn't know how lucky she was and actually deceived the emperor. Chapter 301. Ji Ziyu pulled on his hat and hid his face in the shadows. He did not want anyone to see him here. However, Pang Zhao's actions this time were truly out of his expectations. If he knew that Pang Xiao would secretly send troops to search for the whereabouts of the family Qin's fourth young miss, he might not have ordered people to kill the family Qin. Ji Ziyu never would have thought that not only did Pang Xiao not take the opportunity to kill the family Qin, he even fell in love with Qin Si. He always felt that Pang Xiao was a very principled and rational person. Who would have thought that there would be a time when he would disregard everything for the woman he liked? Ji Ziyu did not know what to feel in his heart. In short, it was not a good feeling. He had been stationed at the border between Taitan and Dezhou for more than a year. Pang Xiao had also been fighting in the south for this year. They had not seen each other, so he naturally did not know much about Pang Zhao's private matters. He thought that Pang Shao would still be the same as before and would not have changed much. He did not expect that in just half a year, there would be so many unexpected changes. No wonder he picked up Pang Zhao's snow-white beloved horse. It turned out that there were times when he was willing to give such a good Fergana horse to a woman. Now, in order to search for this woman, he had committed such a great crime and given Your Majesty such a great opportunity. Yes, Ji Ziyu concluded that Pang Shao had indeed brought the tiger army out of the city to search for her. Your Majesty also seemed to have concluded this point and ordered him to arrange for the Dragon Stallion army to hold the line. This time, he planned to make a move against Pang Shao and completely weaken him. They were usually very careful in their actions because in terms of merit, he was on par with Pang Shao. He could understand Pang Zhao's difficulties. He had to carefully plan and sell his mistake to the emperor in order to protect himself. However, Pang Shao, who was always calm and scheming, did not care about his own safety for a woman. As Ji Ziyu thought about this, his fists under the cloak gradually clenched. He did not know what he was feeling. Was he angry that Pang Shao did not take revenge for his father? Was he angry that Pang Shao did not know the severity of the situation because of a woman? Or was he angry that he had caused a series of troubles for Pang Shao after charging into the Dian's troops who surrendered? He could not distinguish his emotions, but he was so irritated that he wanted to kill someone. At the same time, a group of peoples. Prince Zhongshuan, you still don't want to get out of the carriage to accept your punishment. Qi Rugong and Zhou Jinwei approached the carriage one after the other. The onlookers and the tiger army, including Li Qitian, Li Guanwen, and Ji Ziyu, all looked at the carriage. The curtain of the carriage was lifted, and a stooped old man in his 70s with white hair and beard stepped out of the carriage, trembling. Following him was a little girl wearing a pink-lined jacket, and her hair was combed into a double-ringed bun. The old man put a wooden stool in front of the carriage. The crowd was in an uproar. Prince Zhongshuan was a man. Did he need a stool to get out of the carriage? At this moment, the dark blue cotton curtain was lifted by a white jade-like hand. The first thing the crowd saw was a young woman with long black hair and a gentle silhouette as she got out of the carriage with her head lowered. She helped the little girl get out of the carriage, and the crowd quieted down again. It was a beautiful girl wearing a light green dress and a snow-white fox fur coat. She was wearing a white fox and ruby rabbit. She stood in the crowd, somewhat at a loss as to what to do. Her pair of bright almond eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of mist due to the shock. Her slender fingers, as white as jade, straightened the fur collar and lowered her head. Half of her face was hidden in the snow-white fur collar. Under the winter sun, her white skin reflected the snow-white collar, making her entire body glow. Her light green dress brought a touch of spring to the gray winter. It was so bright that it made people's hearts tremble. Li Qitian, who was in the crowd, narrowed his eyes. Head eunuch Li Guanwen opened his mouth in shock. He didn't even realize that he was sucking in a mouthful of cold air. Ji Ziyu was expressionless, but his peach blossom eyes flashed. There seemed to be a voice in his heart saying, "She is the fourth miss of the family Qin family." Qi Rugong and Zhou Jinwei, who were close by, were dumbfounded. On the other hand, the tiger army soldiers nearby were calmer. They had all seen the Qin Yining family before and knew that this was Wang Ye's future wife. Xia Yu was now disguised as an old woman in her 70s. She trembled as she came forward and saluted Zhou Jinwei in a hoarse voice. "General Zhou, you are different from what our leader said. Didn't you say that you were going to escort my miss back to the capital? Why didn't you let my miss enter the capital and even ask her to come out of the carriage?" Zhou Jinwei said blankly, "Who are you? When have I seen you before?" Xia Yu immediately said angrily, "Official Zhou, you are wrong. Although our Dian has pledged allegiance to Dezhou, my miss is still the legitimate daughter of the Marquis of Anping family Qin. Grand Preceptor Qin was once a famous official of the Yen dynasty. What do you mean by denying it like this? You. Sui Jinwei couldn't wrap his head around this and immediately felt that something was wrong. He hurriedly asked his trusted aide, "What's going on? Isn't the Prince Zhongshuan in the carriage? How did you guard it?" The deputy general was also dumbfounded. My lord, please calm down. This subordinate has been carefully watching this carriage the entire time. Not to mention a person, even a sparrow didn't have the chance to fly around. This carriage is indeed Prince Zhongshan. Qin Yining frowned slightly. Her voice was gentle, but there was a hint of anger. Where did this come from? I have been in this carriage the entire time. Other than my family members who are over 70 years old, there was only my 8-year-old servant girl. How could there be another man? Qin Yining angrily glared at Sui Jinwei and sternly reprimanded him. Official Sui, I was originally grateful to you for saving my life. You also promised me that you would continue to search for my father and my lost family members. I also promised to introduce you to my father. But now, you're slandering me in front of so many people. What is the meaning of this? We Dain have pledged allegiance to Dezhou and your majesty because your majesty is a wise ruler. I didn't expect that under a wise ruler, there would be someone like official Sui who would go back on his words. This has really opened my eyes. Qin Yining's words were reasonable and convincing, and the amount of information she had was too much. The crowd was in an uproar. What Prince Zhongshuan privately mobilized troops? What Prince Zhongshuan faked an imperial edict? All of this was nonsense. Chapter 302. In the crowd, Li Qitian frowned and looked at Sui Jinwei suspiciously. Sui Jinwei was the Minister of War and the Commander-in-Chief of the Tiger Army. He had a large number of soldiers under his command. It was inevitable that he would want to monopolize power. However, would Sui Jinwei have the guts to frame Pang Zhishi for his own personal gain? At this moment, Li Qitian didn't know who he should believe. Meanwhile, Qin Yining was still trying his best to make Sui Jinwei the scapegoat. Master Sui, you said that you wanted me to recommend my father before recommending the county king of Yen. Now that I see how you are behaving, let's forget about it. My father is a man of honor and does not want to be associated with villains. If Sui Jinwei still didn't realize that he had been tricked, then he would really be a fool. He was so angry that he stomped his feet and pointed at Qin Yining's nose. You are slandering me. Where did you come from? How dare you pretend to be someone from the Yen dynasty? How dare you make such irresponsible remarks? When did I do such a thing? I did not save you at all. Qin Yining frowned at her yelling. He turned around and looked at the people from the Yen dynasty who had been rescued by the Tiger Army. He did not say anything. However, her unyielding attitude was telling everyone that Sui Jinwei was lying. Qi Ru had been watching the show for a long time and understood that Sui Jinwei had set a trap for your majesty. He went up to check the carriage angrily and did not see Pang Xiao. He confirmed loudly, "Did you search carefully? Prince Zhongshuan is not in the group." "Yes, master." A few young men in the Tiger Army who were close to Pang Xiao and had the opportunity to enter Jinghu Wei understood. One of them muttered in a voice that was neither too loud nor too soft. "This is strange. Prince Zhongshuan has removed his tiger tally. I heard that he is sick. He should be recuperating in the prince's mansion. Why are you in the army?" "That's right." "Is Master Sui confused?" Master Sui was indeed confused. He couldn't figure out why a man would disappear. When he got on the bus, he was still a big man. When he got off the bus, he had turned into this delicate little lady in front of him. The hair on his back stood on end, and cold sweat slid down his forehead. There were only 2 contents in his secret report. The first one was about participating in Pang Zhishi's private mobilization of troops. The second one was about participating in Pang Zhishi's false imperial edict. Right now, the 20,000 Tiger Army soldiers were blocked outside the door by the Divine Arms Battalion, the 5 Armies Battalion, the 3,000 Armies Battalion, and the 10,000 Dragon Stallion Army soldiers. Furthermore, even the Minister of Justice had brought people over to say that they could only leave and not enter. From this, one could see that this huge change was arranged by Your Majesty. The reason why His Majesty made such arrangements was because he believed in his secret report. He planned to use the mistake of Dusk's Dawn to capture him in front of everyone. But in reality, things had gone completely off track for some reason. Pang Zhishi had disappeared. Your Majesty had messed up this matter. Would he swallow him alive? In the crowd, Li Qitian's frown deepened. Ji Ziyu, on the other hand, was sizing up Qin Yining for the first time. A lady in her boudoir was actually able to speak reasonably in public without showing any fear. She was able to completely remove Pang Zhishi's responsibility and throw the blame to someone else. This lady was indeed not simple. Everyone had their own thoughts. The Tiger Army was fine. Due to the strict military rules, they were not allowed to whisper when they were in formation. Thus, no one spoke at this moment. However, the surrounding commoners did not care about this. Everyone gathered in groups of 3 to 5 and discussed endlessly. They were all guessing if Your Majesty wanted to get rid of Pang Zhishi. Some people with political insight even guessed if Your Majesty wanted to get rid of the people who contributed to the founding of the country. When Li Qitian heard these discussions, it was like a slap to his face. He was not a fatuous ruler. He was a wise ruler. He would never do something like putting away the bow after the birds were done, at least not on the surface. This was because he would not allow the history books to record him in such an unsightly manner. However, with the discussions around him, the commoners' various guesses became more and more intense. It was as if he had already done something wrong. All of this was caused by that bastard surnamed Swa's secret report. Just as the situation was in a deadlock, a voice suddenly came from the city gate. Then, someone announced loudly, "Prince Zhongshuan has arrived." When everyone heard this, they all looked in the direction of the city gate. They saw a carriage coming out of the city. The carriage had a vermilion wheel and an ornate roof with swaying tassels. It was the standard of a prince. When the carriage came close, Huzi, who was sitting on the shaft, jumped down and lifted the curtain. Pang Shao, who was wearing a thick fur coat, came out of the carriage with a pale face. He covered his mouth and coughed a few times. Sui Jinwei stared at Pang Shao as if he had seen a ghost. This person. Could it be that this person knows Mao Mountain magic? Some time ago, he saw that he was seriously ill in the military camp. Now that he had returned to the capital, he could not find him among the troops. Yet, he came out of the city. Qi Rugong frowned and went forward to greet him. "Greetings, Wang Yi." Everyone else also bowed. "Greetings, Wang Yi." Pang Shao waved his hand and coughed twice before saying, "There's no need to be so polite." This king heard that someone falsely accused this king of secretly mobilizing troops. They also said that this king took 20,000 soldiers to the Dian border and lied to officials that I was following an imperial order. This. More and more sweat appeared on Sui Jinwei's forehead. Is it because this king has a good temper that officials thinks he's a soft persimmon to be bullied? This king has been ill for many days and has been recuperating in his residence. How dare you accuse this king of secretly mobilizing troops and plotting a rebellion? Your Majesty took pity on me for working so hard and ordered me to rest. The tiger tally is not in my hands. How can I mobilize troops? Besides, I've been recuperating in my residence these days. Yet, you say that I'm far away at the Dayan border and that I'm following an imperial order to train troops. This is the biggest joke in the world. Pang Shao pointed at Qi Rugong, official Qi. Before you order people to act, please do a thorough investigation first. Don't you know where the Prince Zhongshuan's residence is? If you found out about officials was report and suspected this king, wouldn't you have gone to his residence to investigate? Do you need to gather so many people to surround him and make a fool of yourself? Qi Rugang's face turned red when he heard Pang Zhao's words. He thought to himself that he didn't do it, but your majesty did it. But he could only take the blame for your majesty. Li Qitian, who was in the crowd, was fuming with anger, but there was nothing he could do. He really regretted that he thought it was a sure thing. Why didn't he search the Prince Zhongshuan's residence? If he had evidence that Pang Shao wasn't in the residence, would he still be so arrogant? But on second thought, Li Qitian began to wonder whether it was Pang Shao who led the troops or was Jinwei who framed Pang Shao because he wanted to monopolize the power. Li Qitian was naturally suspicious. Now that something like this had happened, he didn't know who to trust. At this time, except for the people in disguise, Pang Shao had the highest rank of nobility. Pang Shao coughed a few more times and ordered, "Open the gate and let people through as usual. Don't block the way here and delay the people's lives. In addition, arrange for the post house to accommodate the people who came from afar in Dayan." Chapter 303. Qin Yining's eyes quickly became misty from the longing of not seeing each other for so many days and the reunion after so many hardships. When she was being chased, she hid in a small hut that could only fit one person in the snow on the mountain. When she didn't eat or drink, she prayed for Pang Shao to appear in the depths of her heart. When she found out that Pang Shao was willing to bear the crime of disobeying the imperial edict and lead troops to find her, she was so moved that her heart was about to burst. However, the situation forced Pang Shao to return to the capital early and couldn't see her. Her emotions gradually turned into longing. On the way here, she was disguised as Pang Shao and would often stare blankly at the mirror. Looking at the handsome face that belonged to Pang Shao in the mirror, although there was an indescribable sense of dissonance, it was also comforting. Now that they had met, her tense nerves suddenly loosened, and the stubbornness she kept in front of outsiders disappeared. When she saw him, she was only left with a heart full of grievances, like a child who had finally found her home after being lost for many days. Pang Zhao's scorching gaze just now echoed her feelings. Qin Yining couldn't help but take a step forward. However, Pang Shao stood in the same place and didn't come forward. He even turned his head stiffly and refused to look at her. Qin Yining stopped in her tracks and the excitement in her heart also cooled down. She felt wronged for a moment. However, when she thought about it, she was now in the capital of Dezhou and Pang Shao was in a difficult situation here. She was also the daughter of a surrendered official. Her words and actions indeed needed to be carefully considered. Qin Yining lowered her head and didn't look at Pang Shao. At this time, Qi Rugong and the others had already arranged for the soldiers and horses to set up camp outside the city. They opened the city gates to allow the people to continue walking normally. As for the families of the surrendered Dayan officials who were rescued by the Tiger Army, they were led to the guest house by the officials from the Ministry of Rights. Someone came up to Qin Yining and said, "Miss Qin, please come with us to the hotel and stay there for the time being." Qin Yining nodded silently, then turned around and followed the man. The guest house was a place where Dezhou received special envoys and honored guests. Emperor Zhou's arrangements were extremely grand for the family members of the surrendered officials. When they were in the Yan dynasty, they had to endure starvation. They lived in fear and trepidation. Now that they were in Dezhou, many of them felt uncertain. They even felt that it would be a good thing if they didn't end up in prison. They didn't expect that Emperor Zhou would allow them to stay in the hotel. These people felt flattered, and then they felt relieved. Seeing Emperor Zhou's attitude, their lives could be saved. Qin Yining held Lian Xiaozhou's hand and walked to the front of the carriage. The two of them quickly boarded the carriage. When Xia Yu saw that Qin Yining was so rational when he met Wang Yi, she felt relieved. She continued to play the role of a family Qin member and got into the carriage. The carriage set off and followed the officials from the Ministry of Rites to the guest house. Pang Xiao stopped by the roadside and watched expressionlessly as Qin Yining's carriage entered the city. Then, he saw a familiar figure from the corner of his eye. Pang Xiao looked around and saw that the people at the city gate had left. He slowly walked towards the person wearing a cloak, hiding his face in the shadow of the cloak. "Why are you here? Are you here to watch the show?" Pang Xiao lowered his voice. Ji Ziyu looked at Pang Xiao. "Your sweetheart has entered the city. Aren't you going to chase after her?" Pang Xiao looked at Ji Ziyu expressionlessly. Ji Ziyu's usually expressionless face did not make an exception for Pang Xiao. The two of them looked at each other silently for a moment. Pang Xiao said, "Thank you for the reminder. I am going to chase after her." Ji Ziyu nodded coldly. "Then let's go." Pang Xiao stared at Ji Ziyu for a moment. In the end, he did not ask any questions. He turned around and returned to the carriage. He ordered coldly, "Chase after the family Qin's carriage." Huzi and Jinghu Wei saw Pang Xiao's expressionless face. Although he did not show any anger, the aura around him was as if he was going to cut off the enemy's head on the battlefield. It was obvious that he was angry at this moment. They were all scared into silence. Huzi stole a glance at Ji Ziyu in the distance and then looked back at Pang Xiao, who was getting into the carriage. He could not help but click his tongue in his heart. If it were someone else, Wang Yi would have already killed him. Why would he even bother with him? Wang Yi and North Placating Marquis were sworn brothers. He did not get angry at Marquis North Placating Marquis. The carriage set off. Jinghu Wei protected Pang Xiao's carriage as it headed into the city. He was ordered to chase after the family Qin Yining's carriage. Ji Ziyu watched as Pang Xiao's carriage disappeared into the city gates. After a while, he also entered the city with a cold expression. Qin Yining's carriage followed the other carriages to the entrance of the guest house. Just as he was about to enter the guest house under the guidance of the officials from the Ministry of Rites, the sound of a speeding carriage came from behind. Everyone did not have time to enter the door before they turned back to look. They saw the luxurious carriage speeding along. Then, the window was pushed open slightly. Prince Zhongshuan only showed half of his face. He gloomily looked in the direction of Qin Yining. When the carriage slowly came to a stop, Prince Zhongshuan smiled coldly. He pointed at Qin Yining and said, "Bring her back to this king's mansion." Ah! Huzi was stunned. What kind of attitude was Master showing? What did he want to do? The people who were just as shocked as Huzi were momentarily unable to react. Was Prince Zhongshuan robbing someone in the middle of the street? Qin Yining calmly looked at Pang Xiao's cold expression in the carriage. His first reaction was that something was wrong. His current attitude made him feel very uncomfortable. However, Pang Xiao had always been very gentle to her. She was certain that Pang Xiao had feelings for her. If he did not have feelings for her, why would Pang Xiao take the risk to save her? Now, in front of everyone, Pang Xiao had a gloomy expression as if he was robbing someone by force. Qin Yining's thoughts turned quickly. He had already understood Pang Xiao's intentions. He could not help but sigh inwardly at this man's attentiveness. You. Qin Yining seemed to have been angered to the extreme. His body actually started to sway. When Pang Xiao saw Qin Yining's body sway, he immediately sat up straight. His hands clenched into fists. However, after a few breaths, his fists slowly relaxed. What about you? Now that you're in this king's territory, you're not allowed to say anything. Pang Shao said to his subordinates, do you need this king to teach you what to do? Ah. Oh. Yes. Huzi was still shrouded in fog, but he still knew how to follow orders. He immediately ordered his men to capture Qin Yining. When Lian Xiaozhou saw that so many people wanted to capture Qin Yining, her face turned pale. In a panic, she tried to grab Qin Yining's hand and run away. Qin Yining was pulled along by her and ran a few steps. The people behind them caught up and surrounded the two of them. Lian Xiaozhou's eyes were like an angry kitten. She still tightly held on to Qin Yining's hand. He only thought that his family's Wang Yi had taken a fancy to this beauty, or that he wanted to avenge his father, so he kidnapped the daughter of his enemy and brought her to his home. And he was not the only one who thought this way. Perhaps the people outside who did not understand the situation also thought this way. This was the situation that Pang Shao and Qin Yining wanted. The carriage returned to the prince's residence. Pang Shao ordered the side door to be opened and did not let anyone get off the carriage. Qin Yining got into the carriage and directly entered Prince Zhongshuan's residence. The building of the prince's residence was very grand. The carved eaves were covered in snow. It was different from Dian's exquisite and graceful buildings. Every part of the residence revealed a kind of wild and rough feeling. Although it was not as detailed as Dian's gardens, it had a different kind of beauty. Qin Yining looked out through the cracks in the carriage window. In just a short time on the way to the guest room, he was already shocked by the spaciousness of Prince Zhongshuan's residence. Such a large residence could not have been built in 1 or 2 years. Presumably, this was the residence of one of the princes of Beiji. After Dezhou was founded, did Li Qitian directly give this place to Pang Shao to live in? Qin Yining was lost in his thoughts and did not notice that the carriage was slowly coming to a stop. The curtain of the carriage was pushed open. Before Qin Yining could react, he was pulled into a broad and familiar embrace. Lian Xiaozhou was shocked. She quickly pushed away the lecher who dared to bully Qin Yining and shouted, "Bad guy, go away, bad guy." Pang Shao, however, remained unmoved. He planted numerous kisses on Qin Yining's earlobes and neck. Lian Xiaozhou saw that this person still did not let go. She could not beat Pang Shao, so she angrily went up and bit Pang Zhao's arm. Although it was not painful because of the winter clothes, Lian Xiaozhou still bit Pang Zhao's clothes and continued to wave her small fists. Pang Shao was almost punched in the nose. He had no choice but to let go. He said impatiently, "Where did you get this wild girl? How can she bite people? Is she a dog?" Qin Yining pushed Pang Shao away and pulled Lian Xiaozong over. She patted Lian Xiaozong's shoulder comfortingly and pinched Lian Xiaozong's little face, which was red with anger. She said, "Don't be angry. He was just teasing us." Lian Xiaozhou angrily pointed at Pang Shao. "Bad, uncle, bad guy. Sister, let's go." Even if Lian Xiaozhou's words were not smooth, this sentence still provoked Pang Shao. Pang Zhao's face darkened. He threw Lian Xiaozhou off the carriage and threw her to Huzi. Huzi hurriedly caught her. But Lian Xiaozhou was not convinced. She still struggled and pointed at Pang Shao. "Bad, bad uncle." Pang Zhao's face darkened. He could not bear it anymore and said, "You called her sister. How did I become a bad uncle?" "Bad uncle." Lian Xiaozhou's arms were restrained by Huzi. Only her legs were still kicking. Pang Shao thought that he was indeed 8 years older than Qin Yining. He was so depressed that he could not help but feel depressed. Just as one of them was sullen and the other was shouting, "Bad uncle," Qin Yining, who had been looking at the scene for a long time, could not help but laugh. Her laughter stunned the guards and servants of the prince's mansion who had never seen her before. Pang Zhao's displeasure dissipated when he heard her clear and melodious laughter. He could not help but laugh as well. The atmosphere immediately became much more relaxed. Qin Yining looked around. Seeing that there were so many people and that he did not know if there were spies sent by other people, he lowered the curtain again. Pang Zhao waved his hand and said, "You can all leave. Tidy up Su Shui garden for Miss Qin to live in. Those who have nothing to do can leave." "Yes." Everyone saluted and left one after another. Not long after, only Pang Zhao, Huzi, Xiaoyu, and Lian Xiaozhou were left outside the carriage. Lian Xiaozhou seemed to be tired of scolding Pang Zhao. She only stared at him. Bad uncle seemed to have also struggled out of the shock of the age difference. He lifted the curtain and helped Qin Yining get off the carriage. Qin Yining saw that there was no one around and introduced, "This is Lian Xiaozhou. I almost froze to death in the mountains this time. She saved me." When Pang Zhao heard that it was this little girl who saved Qin Yining's life, his gloomy face finally brightened. He no longer cared about being promoted and said to Qin Yining, "I will order people to take her to a place to settle down. You come with me to meet my mother, maternal grandfather, and maternal grandmother." Chapter 305. On the way here, Qin Yining had been thinking about what happened in front of the city gate today. She was also analyzing the current situation in Dezhou. She was concerned about the safety of her family. She had thought about everything, but she had forgotten to analyze her current situation. Now that Pang Zhao had forcibly taken her to the prince's mansion, she would not only have to face Pang Zhao, but also Pang Zhao's family. But she was Qin Huaiyuan's daughter after all. Even if the cause of Qin Huaiyuan's father's death was the tyrant of Beiji State, Qin Huaiyuan's plan to sow discord was the fuse. Would Pang Zhao's mother dislike her? Or even hate her? Also, what position should she place herself in to face Pang Zhao's family? The Daiyan state had been destroyed, and she had stepped onto the land of the capital as the daughter of a surrendered official. She no longer had an identity that matched Pang Zhao's. Even if he didn't care, his elders wouldn't see her as an equal, right? Most importantly, this was the first time Qin Yining had met an elder, and she didn't prepare a greeting gift. Qin Yining was immersed in her nervous thoughts. She didn't notice that Pang Zhao had bent down to her height and observed her unpredictable expression for a while. It was the first time he had seen Qin Yining's expression so rich. In the past, he only knew that Qin Yining was an extremely rational and calm girl, which often made him forget her real age. Only now, when she was so nervous that her face turned red, did Pang Zhao remember that she was just a girl who had just reached marriageable age. Their noses were getting closer and closer to each other. They were so close that Pang Zhao could smell the unique fragrance on her body. Qin Yining suddenly came back to her senses and took 2 steps back in shock. Why are you so close to me?" When she came back to her senses, she was faced with a big face. Anyone would be shocked. Pang Zhao smiled. "Look at you. Don't be nervous. My grandfather and grandmother are ordinary people. My mother's temperament is even more gentle. They don't have the pretentiousness of those nobles. You're so good. They'll definitely like you when they see you." Qin Yining nodded nervously and said hesitantly, "But I came here in a hurry and didn't prepare anything. It was really rude of me." Pang Zhao chuckled. "What else do you need to prepare? It's fine as long as he's here." Qin Yining's face turned even redder as he listened. Pang Zhao's hand dug into Pang Zhao's palm, causing Pang Zhao to chuckle again. After passing through the Erdawi gate, they turned left and circled around an exquisite garden before arriving at the Chuewa gate. As soon as they entered, an elderly woman came forward to greet them. Wang Yi. Yes. Tell old madam, and old master that this king has come back with Miss Qin. Yes. The elderly woman didn't dare to say anything more. She immediately ordered a young maid to hurry inside to deliver the message. Pang Shao held Qin Yining's hand and walked leisurely to the upper room of the inner residence. She didn't forget to whisper with a smile, "My grandmother has a shrewd temperament. When she was young, she played volleyball on the river and used to be a bodyguard. She was very good at martial arts. Later, she wanted to live a peaceful life, so she was conquered by my grandfather's cooking skills." Hearing her introduction, Qin Yining couldn't help laughing. My grandfather is a gentle and honest man. Although he has a soft personality and a kind heart, he is also an extremely intelligent person. I think my mother's cleverness was inherited from my grandfather. Qin Yining nodded and said, "I can see that you're so smart. Old madam must be very smart." Pang Shao smiled and scratched Qin Yining's nose. She said with a smile, "You don't have to be so formal. Just call my mother aunt. My mother used to be a maidservant in the Pang family. Although she wasn't very literate, she still saw some aspects of the general's estate. If my father's wife didn't drive my mother away out of jealousy, I might not be alive in this world." Qin Yining said seriously, "Aunt must be a very tenacious person." "Yes." Pang Shao smiled and said, "You don't have to worry. They are very easygoing." Qin Yining saw his warm smile and couldn't help but smile as well. She could feel that when Pang Shao mentioned her grandfather, grandmother, and mother, there was a sense of intimacy and ease in his heart. After listening to Pang Xiao's brief introduction, she knew that this family's temperament shouldn't be difficult to get along with. She was so nervous that she was sweating all over. Now, she calmed down. At this time, a few soft barks of a puppy suddenly came from the front. She saw a snow-white furry ball jumping out of the main door of the upper courtyard. She took a closer look and saw that it was a snow-white little Pekingese. Following the little Pekingese was a woman in her early 20s. When she saw Pang Shao, the woman curtsied and smiled. No wonder Dabai didn't want to stay in Madam's arms. So it knew that Wang Yi had returned and specially came to welcome him. Pang Shao smiled and lowered her head to look at the little Pekingese. She said to Qin Yining, "This is Dabai. I told you about him before." When Dabai was mentioned, Qin Yining couldn't help but think of Bai. She felt a wave of heartache and disappointment in her heart. However, she didn't show it on her face. Instead, she bent down to look at Dabai. Dabai's fur was fluffy and snow-white. He had round black eyes and a slightly pouty black nose and mouth. He stuck out his pink tongue and breathed at her as if he was smiling. Just looking at him made one feel fond of him. Pang Shao smiled and said, "Dabai, salute." As soon as she finished speaking, Dabai stood up and clasped his paws together. Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh at Dabai's charmingly naive and amusing appearance. Pang Shao patted Dabai's head and smiled. "This little guy is very affectionate. He doesn't bite and has a very good temper. If you like him, you can come to my mother's place to play often." Qin Yining nodded with a smile. Pang Shao held Qin Yining's hand and entered the upper courtyard. Dabai stuck out his pink tongue and walked around the two of them. Meanwhile, the woman followed behind the two of them and looked at Qin Yining curiously. In the corridor, there were maids holding up dark blue cotton curtains. The two of them entered one after the other. The warmth of the curtains made them feel very comfortable. After handing his cloak to the maid, Pang Shao led Qin Yining to the eastern courtyard. In fact, the layout of the courtyard was similar to that of Dian. The only difference was that the Arhat bed in front of the window had been replaced by a heated Kong bed next to the window. Just looking at it made one feel very warm. At this moment, a tall and slightly plump elderly woman in her early 60s was sitting cross-legged next to the dark Kong bed. She looked at them with a smile. On the other side of the table, there was an old man wearing a dark blue cotton gown and a warm hat. He was currently adding tobacco to the brass tobacco pipe. His rough thumb was carefully holding the tobacco firmly in place. Another beautiful woman who looked to be in her 40s was sitting sideways on the edge of the Kong bed. The rest of the maids and nannies were standing in 2 rows next to the screen with their hands hanging by their sides. Qin Yining had just relaxed, but now he was nervous again. She hurriedly stepped forward and bowed. However, Peng Xiao was 1 step ahead of her. She smiled and said, "Grandfather, grandmother, mother, this is Sister Yi that I mentioned earlier." She turned around and pulled Sister Yi to kneel down with her. They bowed to the elders together. "Look, our Dai Fu has learned to be protective of his children. Are you afraid that your grandmother will bully your wife?" Grandmother Ma spoke with a northern accent. Her tone was crisp and friendly. Chapter 306. This nickname really included all the expectations that the elders had for him. It could be seen that his grandfather, grandmother, and mother cherished Peng Xiao very much. However, in Qin Yining's impression, Peng Xiao had always been a domineering figure. It was really difficult to combine him with the simple and honest pet name Dai Fu, which made him feel funny for no reason. Qin Yining couldn't laugh out loud in front of the elders, so he had to suppress his laughter and remind himself not to be impolite. He bent his knees and saluted Mrs. Ma again. "Old madam, nice to meet you." "Good, good, good. Come and sit beside me. It's warm on the Kong." Mrs. Ma pushed Yao Clan. "Go and sit aside." Yao Clan moved aside with a smile. "Mother, you are too partial. You don't want your daughter anymore when you see your granddaughter-in-law." After being teased by his granddaughter-in-law again and again, Qin Yining's face had already turned red with shame. He could only sit sideways on the Kong. Mrs. Ma took Qin Yining's hand and said with a smile, "My silly boy always talks about how good Sister Yi is and how good Sister Yi is when he comes home. I've heard it so many times. Now that you are in the capital, Dai Fu doesn't have to miss you anymore." At last, she laughed happily. Qin Yining really wanted to bury his face in his clothes. She had never seen such a candid old woman. Moreover, she and Peng Xiao hadn't settled down yet. There was a natural moat between them. Now it hadn't been settled yet, but Mrs. Ma was so sure. It seemed that she was going to marry into the Dai family tomorrow. Seeing that Qin Yining was so shy, Yao Qinggu lit a cigarette, took a puff, and said slowly and softly, "Don't scare the little girl. She's from a rich family. She's different from us." Qin Yining couldn't help but look at Yao Qinggu. The old man was just as Peng Xiao had said. He looked like an old sheep and his tone was very gentle. However, the meaning behind his words was not simple. Does he hate family Qin? Or was he being sarcastic? Or was he telling her that the marriage between her and Peng Xiao was not simple? Qin Yining smiled and said, "Old master, you must be joking. In terms of status, how could the prince's mansion be considered a small household? On the other hand, the Yan dynasty has already been destroyed." Yao Qinggu took another puff from his pipe and smiled gently without saying anything. Madame Ma glared at Yao Qinggu and said, "You old thing, what right do you have to interrupt a woman's conversation? It's not early anymore. Didn't you say that you were going to stew fish for Dai Fu today?" "Yes." Yao Qinggu got off the bed and strolled outside with one hand behind his back and the other holding his pipe. Madame Ma smiled and said, "Don't mind him. Let's talk as women. Yao Clan took a white porcelain bowl with a golden gilded lid from a maidservant and handed it to Qin Yining. She smiled gently and said, "Eat some almond tea to warm yourself up. It's cold outside, right?" "Thank you, Auntie." Qin Yining was overwhelmed by the favor and quickly took the bowl with both hands. Yao Clan was a tall beauty. This kind of beauty had nothing to do with age. It was a kind of gentleness and intelligence that came from the inside out. When she spoke, there was a smile in her eyes that were 80% similar to Pang Zhao's. She was as gentle as the water of a warm spring. Qin Yining felt very peaceful and comfortable when he looked at her. Qin Yining took a sip of the almond tea. The warm aroma spread from his mouth to his heart and soothed his nervousness. Yao Clan smiled and said, "You just came to the north and it's winter and you're tired from the long journey. The journey must be very tiring, right?" Yao Clan's voice was different from Madame Ma's gentleness. Qin Yining couldn't help but smile and said, "Auntie, the journey was quite smooth. However, this is the first time I've seen such heavy snow. When I was young, I lived at the northern border of Dian. At that time, I thought that the winter there was the coldest. I didn't expect there to be a place colder than Liang City." Madame Ma smiled and said, "Silly girl, you're in the south. Of course, it's much warmer than the north. When I was young, I went to places further north. That place is called cold. Yes, I used to think that I was much happier than those ladies who grew up in the boudoir because I had the opportunity to live freely outside and see the outside world. However, now I'm very envious of old Madam. Wang Yi said that you've been to many places. If old Madam has time, can you tell me about the places you've been to? Let me broaden my horizons." From the conversation just now, Qin Yining could tell that Madame Ma was a straightforward and cheerful person. She liked her very sincerely. As the elderly got older, she liked to talk about things that happened when she was young. It just so happened that she liked to hear about it. This was an excellent way to get closer to her. Sure enough, Madame Ma nodded happily and said, "Okay, as long as you like to hear it." Then, she looked at Pang Xiao who was peeling oranges and stuffing them into his mouth and said, "Dai Fu, why don't you let Yi stay with me? I like this girl very much as soon as I see her." Pang Xiao was a little surprised. Before he could answer while chewing the oranges, the Yao clan had already complained, "Mother, I still want to be close to Sister Yi. How can you snatch her away from me?" The Yao clan were sensible people. After all, Qin Yining was not a girl of the Yao clan. Naturally, she couldn't live with the Yao clan. Even if Yao Qinggu was old, he still had to avoid arousing suspicion. Madame Ma was a straightforward person in Jianghu and didn't care much about these details. However, the Yao clan used to be the maidservants of a big family, so they knew these rules more carefully. Hearing the Yao clan's words, Madame Ma suddenly came to her senses. She coughed awkwardly and said, "Girl, don't blame me for being reckless. I just like you when I see you. How could that be? I can't wait to be happy." Qin Yining's smile was very sincere. Pang Xiao had already swallowed the oranges at this time. He patted the white silk in his hands and said, "Grandmother, mother, don't trouble yourself. I just ordered people to prepare Su Shui garden for Sister Yi to live in. The matters of the imperial court are complicated, so it's more appropriate to let Sister Yi live in Su Shui garden. I still have many things that I need Sister Yi to help me with." Madame Ma nodded in understanding and said, "Although I don't get involved in the matters of the outside world, I still know some things. Sister Yi is a good child. You can't treat her badly. As for the 10 people in your backyard, if they can't do it, you can send them to the farmstead." Pang Xiao almost wanted to kneel down in front of Madame Ma when he heard this. Even if there was nothing going on between him and the 10 people, he could tell that there was something going on. Seeing Pang Xiao's expression, Yao clan couldn't help laughing. They sighed in their hearts. It seemed that their son was really devoted to Qin Yining. Yao Clan took Qin Yining's hand and said, "Sister Yi, don't think too much. Madam Dowager is talking about the 10 concubines that your majesty rewarded to Dai Fu a few days ago." Qin Yining said understandingly, "Auntie, I know about this. Since it's a gift from His Majesty, we can't refuse it, nor can we treat it unfairly." She turned to Madame Ma and said with a smile, "Madam Dowager, just let them continue to live as before." She hadn't married into the family yet, but Madame Ma straightforwardly considered her first. She was very grateful, but she also knew that even if she became Pang Zhao's wife, she was in no position to say anything about concubines. Madame Ma smiled with relief. "Sister Yi is a good child." Yao Clan stood up and said, "Mother, I'll take Sister Yi to Su Shui Garden to settle down first. I'll bring her here for dinner later." The Yao Clan continued. "This time, he knew that you were in danger outside, so he immediately led the soldiers out. Her grandfather said that this child finally didn't have to marry a military knife or a war horse. Her grandmother was very happy when she heard that. I also felt that it was a good thing that there was someone who could tie down his heart and make him focus more on his own life. We are very happy that you can come to the capital." Qin Yining's heart was a little cold. It seemed that the future mother-in-law didn't have a good first impression of her. The reason why she was polite to her now was that Pang Xiao liked her. The Yao Clan rambled on for so long, but the most interesting part was the last part. When she was in danger outside, Pang Xiao risked everything to save her. The Yao Clan and Yao Qinggu were actually very dissatisfied. Moreover, the Yao Clan thought that Pang Xiao valued her too much. For the current Pang Xiao, having such a burden might not be a good thing. As elders, they hoped that Pang Xiao could be safe and carry on the family line. As for who would carry on the family line, they didn't actually care. Just now, when they were in the room, they also said that the emperor had bestowed Pang Xiao with 10 beautiful concubines. However, the Yao clan were very cultured people. They wouldn't criticize directly, but would tactfully express their thoughts in their own way. If they had a careless person, they probably wouldn't understand the Yao clan's meaning. Qin Yining couldn't help but sigh inwardly. When she was in the Duke Dinggua's household, she once heard her maternal grandmother and her 2 aunts chatting about her cousin's marriage. Her maternal grandmother didn't agree to her cousin's marriage to a certain scholar. Her maternal grandmother's reason was that the scholar was extremely intelligent. The scholar's mother must also be very intelligent. Moreover, the scholar was very obedient to his mother. If the family wasn't upright, then her cousin would have to face an extremely intelligent mother-in-law and a filial husband. Her future life wouldn't be good. Now, she didn't know why she thought of her maternal grandmother's words. She really didn't know which one Pang Xiao would favor between her and the Yao clan. However, Qin Yining wasn't a young lady who hadn't experienced any hardships. She always knew that if she wanted something, she had to work hard to fight for it. In this world, who would like her at first sight? Not to mention outsiders, even her mother disliked her when they first met. It was only after interacting with her for a long time that their relationship gradually became closer. Since she liked Pang Xiao, she would play her role well. She wouldn't let Pang Xiao be sandwiched between her and the Yao clan. She also wouldn't back down easily. Qin Yining's mind moved at lightning speed. It only took her a breath. "Thank you, Auntie. The outside world is complicated. I'm just a woman, so I don't know that much. For the next few days, I'll have to trouble you temporarily. When my father and family arrive in the capital, we can move back. At that time, my parents and I will come to thank you again." Yao clan raised their eyebrows. It seemed that not only did Qin Yining have a forgettable appearance, but she also had an unparalleled intelligence and a strong personality. She was tactfully telling her that Qin Yining didn't need to rely on Pang Xiao to survive. She had her own family and her own foundation. Although Qin Huayuan was a surrendered minister, from the general trend, the family Qin would definitely be put in important positions. Compared to Pang Xiao, who had his military power stripped and was on vacation at home with his title, the family Qin's future was immeasurable. Perhaps Pang Xiao would one day need a strong father-in-law. Not only did Qin Yining understand her tactful complaint, but she also tactfully rebutted her words. However, she couldn't hate such a girl. She even felt lucky that Pang Xiao liked someone with such a personality. With Pang Xiao's current status and situation, it would be beneficial for his family if he had a smart and virtuous wife in his family. Yao Clan smiled and said, "There's no need to thank me. I'm not an outsider. I don't participate much in the affairs of the outside world. You can discuss it with Big Fortune." The implication was that she would not intervene in the affairs of the outside world. She only needed to discuss with Pang Xiao. Qin Yining saw that Yao Clan's smile was sincere and no longer held any grudges. She could finally relax and nodded heavily, saying, "Auntie, don't worry. I will." Lunch was eaten in the upper courtyard. Yao Qinggu personally cooked a stewed fish for Pang Xiao. He also prepared a few of his signature dishes. There were fewer rules during the banquet, but there was also a lot of warmth. After lunch, Pang Xiao smiled and said, "I have an appointment with Mr. Xia and Mr. Su. They should be waiting in the study with the other aides. I'll go to the study with Sister Yi first." Yao Qinggu and Yao Clan were stunned. Pang Xiao had many aides under her command. Su Weiji, who was good at scheming, and Xiaoyu, who was good at making decisions and disguising, were the two people Pang Xiao relied on the most. They didn't expect Pang Xiao to bring Qin Yining to meet them. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.